Boy, they got quiet, didn't they?
Makes me nervous. Well, he's probably
I was only taking probably running in the next 6 weeks. But he said it was about 5 days. It was not kidding, but I hope.
Okay, if we can, we'll go ahead and get started. And before we get started, I'd like to, as we begin our meeting, let me start over again. Welcome, everybody, to this meeting tonight, and we welcome those in the audience and also those at home that are watching. We'd like to begin our meeting by acknowledging that the land on which we gathered is the territory of the Ottawa and Chippewa peoples who have stewarded this land throughout the generations. We thank you for your strength and resilience in protecting this land and inspiring us to uphold our responsibility to do the same. As we start our meeting, I hope that everyone will interact with each other with respect, dignity, patience, and charity. So with that, we'll open the meeting with the Pledge of Allegiance, please. And would Commissioner Wilson lead us, please?
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Okay, before we get started, we have a presentation to make, and instead of me, well, it's not the way it is on here, but I guess we have to do roll call first, don't we? Roll call.
Yes, sir. Commissioner Werner.
Here.
Mayor Pro Tem Shamrow. Here. Commissioner Wilson.
Here.
Commissioner Stanley. Here. Commissioner Walter. Here. Mayor.
Here. Okay. We have a presentation to make because this month happens to be Michigan Library Appreciation Month. Instead of me doing the presentation, I've asked Mayor Pro Tem Shamrow to do so. She's a member of the Friends, a longtime member of the Friends of the Library. And we have Ms. Howard here, the Executive Director of the Library. So if you would, I would appreciate that. And Ms. Howard says she only has about 5 minutes worth of remarks, but we'll let that go at that.
You can put the timer on me. I've always wanted that.
In that case, it's only 3 then.
Yes, I'll be ready.
All right. Well, good to see you up here, Michelle.
Thanks for having me.
All right. Proclamation declaring October 2022 as Michigan Library Appreciation Month. Whereas the Michigan Library Association, MLA, annually designates the month of October as a statewide observance to celebrate the contribution of Michigan's public school, academic, tribal, cooperative, and special libraries. And whereas Traverse City and Grand Traverse County have recognized the importance of libraries since 1869, beginning with the Ladies Library until now with a district-wide system. And whereas Michigan's libraries continue to evolve and expand their services and now offer more programs, events, services, resources, and collections than ever to serve and support their communities. And whereas libraries are now dynamic centers of discovery and lifelong learning, serving as concert venues, art galleries, meeting spaces, community living spaces, maker spaces, study rooms, and more. And whereas libraries now offer patrons much more to borrow than books, including laptops, mobile hotspots, tools, games, movies, music, and more, serving as an indispensable resource for all ages. And whereas libraries provide free access to information to millions of Michiganders, allowing them to explore and discover a vast world of information and entertainment. And whereas libraries provide materials and programs that are as diverse as the people they serve, while protecting patrons' privacy and supporting their rights to read. And whereas libraries serve as the primary point of access for people without internet or access to computers, enabling everyone to connect to the people and ideas of the world. And whereas Michigan libraries are indispensable educational and cultural institutions in the heart of our communities, offering Michiganders a place to gather, socialize, study, and learn. And whereas hundreds of libraries and millions of library supporters across Michigan are celebrating Michigan Library Appreciation Month this October, now therefore it be declared that I, Amy Shamrow, Mayor Pro Tem of Traverse City, do hereby proclaim October 2022 as Michigan Library Appreciation Month. During this time, we encourage all residents to visit their library in person or virtually and connect with numerous services, resources, and collections their library now provides.
Thank you.
And I think you could even add more to the list of things it provides, because ours has a lot of great stuff like games and a lot of other materials,
Puzzles, yeah.
puzzles, yep. So I'll let you speak now. There
Okay,
you
thank
are.
you.
It's a pleasure.
Thank you so much.
Congratulations.
Just really quickly, thank you to Mayor Pro Tem Shamro and the mayor and city commissioners. Thank you for your service to our community and for celebrating National Library Month. At the library, we really believe in education belongs to everyone in our community from all ages and all abilities. So just a few facts. The library welcomed, in 2021, we welcomed over 287,000 people in our doors, and we circulated over 1.1 million items. Many of the things Amy mentioned, and one exciting thing was we even sent a book to the National Library of Denmark, in National Danish Library in Denmark. So as librarians, it was like super exciting. And so we do that. We circulate items. We, of course, help people. In 2021, we answered over 25,000 reference questions. And then, of course, we also offer tons of educational programming and entertainment. So this weekend on Sunday is our chili cook-off, if you want to come by. You get to taste chili from 1 to 3. It's a good time. And if you haven't been to the library, I would encourage you to come check us out. Library sale. Oh, yeah. And there's a library, the Friends of the Library book sale is November 4th, 5th, and 6th. So come check out come purchase some libraries. You don't check those ones out, you actually take them and buy them. And all the proceeds help the library out. So happy to answer any questions. I know you have a busy agenda, but.
Okay. Thank you,
questions?
Michelle.
No? Okay.
Keep up the great work.
Thank you.
Thank you, and thanks for all of what you do.
Thank you for all that you do for our community. It's appreciated. Okay. With that, we'll start with announcements from the city manager.
Thank you, Honorable Mayor and City Commissioners. This evening, we're working with a declaration from the Governor's Office for State of Emergency, and this is up north in the UP along the Menominee River. We're in District 7, and there's a paper mill fire up there, so we have the Governor's Office through the state activated the state EOC, and they have requested resources from Traverse City. So the fire chief is up at that location now to help take command of that scene on behalf of, through our, basically our declared agreements to support each other on these types of situations. We've had 3 chiefs from the region go so far, fire chief from Elmira, fire chief from Leland, and now Chief Toller. So they're taking turns in terms of taking command and helping fight that fire. It is a paper mill, and in essence, paper has a lot of different materials on it, potential contaminants, including PFAS. So they're capturing all the water and basically reclaiming it properly to have it treated. The next item is this week is the Michigan Municipal League Conference, in which there'll be members there, including Commissioner Treadwell and staff. And as you may recall, we're competing for the Community Excellence Award, and this is the municipal prestigious award. Ours was nominated as the West Boardman Lake Loop Trail, and actually the whole Boardman Lake Loop Trail. I keep calling it the West Boardman because that's the portion we've been working on most recently. Then last but not least, Architect Ray Kendra will be providing a update to the county commissioners on the senior center this Wednesday at 8 a.m. at here in these chambers. So he's just giving them an update in terms of the current status of where we're at with that, as you were provided a couple of weeks ago. Thank you.
Okay, announcements from the Deputy City Clerk.
Meetings scheduled this week are the Arts Commission will meet on Wednesday, October 19th at 3:30 p.m. in the committee room. The Joint Planning Commission will meet this Wednesday, October 19th at 5:15 in the chambers. The Downtown Development Authority will meet this Friday, October 21st at 8:30 a.m. in the chambers. Boards and commissions that we're currently looking for applicants are Local Officer Compensation Commission, Downtown Development Authority, Brown Bridge Advisory, and Planning Commission. Of course, we're always accepting applications for any boards. Some community updates. The City Streets Division has pushed back the start date of the fall leaf pickup program to October 24th due to the late leaf drop. Pickup will begin on the west side of town and moving east. Please note that brush pickup is only conducted in the spring. The Planning Department will host a public open house for the master plan rewrite and mobility action plan projects on Wednesday, October 26th from 3:30 to 7 p.m. at the Haggerty Center. And lastly, I would like to remind the commissioners, staff, and members of the public to speak into the microphone so those watching at home and a recording of this meeting is easily heard. Thank you.
Thank you. Also, the Parks and Recreation Board Interview Ad Hoc Committee also meets tomorrow at 11:30. So those that want to come and sit through the interviews, more than welcome. All right, with that, would you please give us the consent counter?
Yes. The purpose of the consent calendar is to expedite business by grouping non-controversial items together to be dealt with by one commission motion without discussion. Any member of the commission, staff, or the public may ask that any item on the consent calendar be removed therefrom and placed elsewhere on the agenda for individual consideration by the commission, and such requests will automatically be respected. If an item is not removed from the consent calendar, the action noted in the parentheses on the agenda is approved by a single commission action adopting the consent calendar. 1, consideration of approving the minutes of the October 3rd, 2022 and October 10th, 2022 meetings of the City Commission. Approval recommended. Consideration of authorizing a contract for professional design services to create a consistent park sign design. Approval recommended. 3, consideration of waiving the competitive bidding process and authorizing an out-of-scope agreement for the replacement of the screw pump deflection plate at the wastewater treatment plant. Approval recommended. 4, consideration of waiving the competitive bidding process and authorizing blanket purchase order for snow plowing and hauling services in downtown for the 2022-2023 winter season. Approval recommended. 5, consideration of authorizing a contract for the replacement of the basketball courts at F&M Park and for the construction of new basketball pad at Arbutus Court. Approval recommended. 6, consideration of adopting a resolution adopting the natural hazard mitigation plan. Approval recommended. 7, consideration of declaring a duty weapon as surplus so that it may be sold at appraised value to the retiring officer, Captain James Bussell. Approval recommended.
Okay. Is there anyone on the commission that would like to have an item from the consent counter removed? Mr. Warner?
Item 4, please.
Item 4. Okay. Is there anybody else? Okay. Anyone from the public like to have an item on the consent calendar removed? Okay. Okay, don't see any. I'll be glad to entertain a motion.
Motion to approve the consent calendar as amended.
Okay. The second, please? Second. Mr. Wilson. Okay, we have a motion and a second. All those in favor of the motion say aye.
Aye.
All those opposed say nay. Okay, motion passes. Okay, we had item number 4 removed. Mr. Warner, your question?
I guess I could support this if the DDA was participating in the funding. It states that funds come from various streets and parking maintenance funds. To me, the premium between just plowing normally and this special approach to snow removal, which we're well aware of, we've been given presentations every year, I think that difference in cost should be borne by the DDA. But until that could be figured out, I'd be satisfied if the DDA at least went, a third of the cost for this.
Okay. All right. You've heard the question. I don't agree with that assessment, but that's okay. We agree to disagree. All right. Any other questions? Okay. Yes, ma'am.
I understand there's a, service agreement change possibly in the works. Maybe Mr. Enzi could speak to that.
According to what?
DDA and city
Oh.
service.
Yeah, there is, well, I can also do that through the work that Puma's doing, there is an agreement for what the city should be responsible for and what the DDA should be responsible for. So that is being all part of the discussion and the work that Puma's putting together, which we will be hearing about on November the 2nd. So is that a fair statement? You can add all you want.
Yes, that's a fair statement. It goes into what we are working on now with the trash removal, and it starts that service operation agreement between the DDA and city.
Okay, thank you. All right. All right, any other questions? Okay, I'll entertain a motion.
I'll make the motion that the competitive bidding process be waived and that the city manager be authorized to issue a blanket purchase order to Molon Excavating of Traverse City, Michigan for downtown snow plowing and hauling services for the 2022-2023 winter season at the hourly rates listed in the October 5, 2022 communication from the Director of Public Services with the addition of fuel surcharges as outlined in the communication of October 13, 2022, with funds available in the various streets and parking maintenance funds.
Thank you. Is there support?
Support.
Support from Ms. Shamro. Okay, any other questions? Okay, all those in favor of the motion say aye. Aye. All those opposed say nay.
No.
Okay, roll call, please.
Commissioner Werner?
No.
Mayor Pro Tem Shamro?
Yes.
Commissioner Wilson?
Yes.
Commissioner Stanley?
Yes.
Commissioner Walter?
Yes.
Commissioner Treadwell?
Yes.
Mayor?
Yes. Okay. Okay, next we go on to the old business. We have a consideration of a request from Commissioner, well, let's get his request as relates from Commissioner Warner and Commissioner Walter that we talked about a month ago about requesting the city manager issue an RFP for development of workforce housing on parcels along Baitner Street and Woodmere Avenue. At that meeting, we wanted some input from the staff. There is a memo in your packet regarding that. I'll let the city manager go through that, and I'll have another comment on top of that. So,
Thank you, Honorable Mayor and City Commissioners. On September 19th, we were asked to add additional information, and so I'll provide that to you. We brought together 7 different departments to discuss the information that at hand in regard to those parcels. And the initial discussions ran around what we just brought up recently is we're working with the county in regard to a facilities planning because we have multiple properties tied to the county. So that was the most recent discussion that we brought up for that particular property. But that being said, the different departments added additional information in regard to this particular parcel itself. Now, the city bought it 4 years ago, and in that agreement, we're not to sell it for 5 years. That possibly being a workaround, there is some recommended work to do before we go out to RFP, and that is to be able to provide some geotechnical reporting that is typically necessary. We did find next to the building, the current DPS building, in terms of the structure, you may recall several years ago, we had to do several $100,000 worth of work into the building because there's a settling issue. So there is work to be done in terms of taking a look at the stability, meaning soils. They do testing of the soils to make sure what is the stability, as well as any pollutionary factors. Otwell Mobby had mobilized to the site prior to and had recommended not disturbing or relocating the contaminated soils until further assessment. We believed we still had time to work on all that in terms of the agreement, which was between the City Commission and the seller of the property, was basically not to address this property for 5 years. So those items are not completed. These types of physical and environmental site conditions are typically completed prior to going out to RFP so that you can include that information to the potential sellers, which is helpful to understand the property and what type of work that may need to be done on it and in terms of the values of the property in itself. So we typically also recommend that an appraisal be completed prior so that you know what the value is of the property that you're putting out there in terms of the agreement that you might be working with in terms of a seller or owner or somebody to purchase it. One of the areas that had been discussed specifically is that it could be used for affordable housing as a project, and certainly that's a location that it could be located at. We talked about other uses in terms of whether to, in the future, expand the DPS and to the administrative concept of a campus, which as time has gone by, we're not quite as excited about now. And that's, again, goes back to the facility planning concept to take a look at in terms of the best and highest use. One of the other things that came out through the discussion is because of the economy of size, typically when you're doing housing, you get a better chance for subsidies if the economy of scale is there. And so it was recommended through staff that we not break it up if we do use it for housing, that we keep it together. We think that we could get a better opportunity to potentially leverage the money with the state or other opportunities. Again, that's just a recommendation, but typically that is true. You get a better chance of leveraging through the state, the larger the project. So we want to, of course, as an organization, put to the highest and best use. The belief is that we have a little time on this. We just discussed we have 632 housing units in the works right now, whether under construction or being prepared for construction, and that this will give us the time to do the proper testing as well as planning for that particular parcel. But we do believe that it is certainly a viable parcel. I know that there was a little bit of concern in regard to why it was brought up in regard to snow. That was never been intended to be a long-term snow placement. That's only been a short-term. But one of the reasons why it came to a head is through our study of the cemetery property, which we're recommending in the future to bring forward to you for use to cemetery, is what can be used and what has to be voted on. And we know to use that property in the cemetery, that has to be taken to the vote of the people. That being said, through that discussion, it came out that the snow placement there that's been there for long before just about any staff member can remember, in terms of the snow there, that's really not an appropriate use. So as of a couple of weeks ago, we believed we did not have that use of that facility. So staff has been working on identifying another location for snow removal. We, of course, have Keystone. We reference that in here, but staff is working with property owner to see if we can go into an agreement. If we can, we'll bring that back to you in hopefully a much more viable place to place snow removal that's at a better cost to the city. So we'll continue to work with the different entities on that and engage in a process of evaluating other significant cities' properties to determine the most feasible options for the city and for the city commission and the operations.
I think, for me, there are 5 bullet points that were listed in the memo, and I think it's the first 3 that are more pertinent to our discussion tonight than the last 2. As mentioned by Mr. Colburn, the parcel, and I said this also at the last meeting, the parcel was not purchased with intent to make it something permanent to where it's always going to be someplace that you can haul in the snow during the winter. It's okay for a short term, but when I'm saying short term, maybe 1 or 2 seasons, not to continue on and do that. That was never the intent. And of course, it's also heard at the last meeting when Mr. Warner and I were going through and dealing with the garage fund and talking about that, is we made the suggestion that if it ever came on the market, we should try to acquire it, and it just so happened it came on the market. Mr. Warner had one idea for what it should be for, and I had another. So, and that's fine. You know, we'll take it from there. Quoting one individual today that I got an email from, you know, saying that trying to dispose of it right now would be like, you know, cutting our noses off to spite our face. Now, whether that's true or not, I'm not ready to dispose of the property because we don't have any other dirt that we can buy that's close to any of our other operating facilities that if we wanted to come back and do something different. The other part, if we do put it out for an RFP, and I'm getting this from my brief experience of working in the private sector for about 5 years, that especially for an organization that has to respond to RFPs, we need to make as clear as we can what it is that we are expecting. And I know a couple of emails, it comes down and said we need to make this affordable. We need to define, if we're going to move that, let's hope that we can define in there, what do we mean by affordable? You know, for me, at least when I've sat here, or at least for the last 4 years, or 4 years before and up till now, it's usually following the matrix that's put out there by the state about, you know, it's all within income level of what could be affordable on 2 houses, or 2 parties, or whatever. I just know that when we're looking for serious responses to RFP, we need to lay out as much of the parameters as we can so there's no second guessing. And that includes electrifying, if that's a goal, or if that's one of our ideas on that. So if that's the route we go, it behooves us to get the best response we need to make out what is our expectation. And if we're not clear on that, then we're going to get back an RFP that may not be so clear. And that's usually where all the confusion comes in at. So just keep that in mind if that's what we're going to do, and others can work on that. So that's my thoughts, and we'll take it from there. So any other questions or responses, comments?
Okay. Just to jump in early, my understanding from our previous meeting on September 19th was that we had very specific questions directed to the city attorney about the 5-year restriction and what our options were related to that. And those were the very specific questions. It wasn't necessarily that we were looking for a laundry list of unattributed reasons to vote no against it, which is what we have from the city manager. And I did reach out previously to the city manager asking, could we also get arguments for why we should vote yes instead of just, in addition to this, so we could have a good informed conversation. We have a nice list of why to vote no. Could we have a list of why to vote yes? What are some reasons to support housing in this location? And I got no response. So I guess I would request that the city attorney, to the best she can with the time she's had, comment on that 5-year restriction and what options we may or may not have as a city commission.
I will agree with your statement about we wanted that, about the 5-year restriction of city attorney, but my recollection of the meeting was, unless we want to go back and listen to it, we wanted input from the staff. So we got it, maybe not what we all wanted to hear, but we got the input. Okay.
If I may, with all due respect to Commissioner Werner, I did respond to him and the other 6 commissioners with the same document so that you were all on the same sheet of music. The city staff is not saying don't use it for housing, not at all. And we'll certainly take direction from the city commission. What we are saying is that there is some information that needs to be had prior to going out to RFP. And that is some of the soil work, some of the environmental work, and appraisal. These are things that are typically done to prepare a good, solid RFP so that whoever is going to do the bid has good, solid information to understand the values involved and how to provide. And the other thing we do need to continue this dialogue on is, what is it that your wants and needs are specifically? As you may recall, when we did Lot O, we had a committee and we worked on nailing down what some of those specific desires were. But what I was also saying in here, and I think was pretty clear, is that we not only need that information on the front side, that until now, this has been not a timely issue in the sense that we believed that we had to, and I say we believe, it's by contract. It's for the commissioners that weren't here. 4 years ago, the city commission approved a contract to purchase this land, and it stated at that time that we were not to sell it until 5 years, which ends October 9th, 2023. So until recently, we had no reason to push all these issues. We've been very busy working on those 600 and some other odd housing units and other services that we provide to this community. And so to throw it into the batch now is certainly something we can work with the city commission on, absolutely, if that's the direction that you direct us to. But understand the history of this, to the commissioners that weren't here, is there is a contract in place between the city and the property owner. And I'm not saying things can't change, but I need to have the city commission understand the premise.
And that's why I've asked the city attorney to comment.
I know. She will.
Yeah,
Mr.
when
Lewis
he's
and
done,
Mr. Goldner.
she could comment.
So I was able to speak with the seller, probably maybe a week ago or so, and he indicated that when they sold the property to the city, it was the intention to have it used for a municipal purpose, or housing would fall into that. So he's not averse to having that discussion about the timeline. He did mention, and this is, I don't want to put words in his mouth, but this is my interpretation of the conversation that I had with him, that he is would be less interested in talking about moving forward with something that would split the property up. And he had, comments about that. So I had a short conversation with him. I was able to get a hold of him and have that. There was the idea of having like an option agreement that would be lengthy enough to sort of outlive that that contract requirement, and that's possible as well. I think, either one of those is something that we can flesh out going forward once we understand what we're looking for to, how we're looking to move forward as a commission. Does that help?
Thank you. And then my next comment was going to be my recollection of the September 19th discussion. My commentary, as well as Commissioner Walter, was that we were proposing that these 3 parcels be moved forward for workforce housing specifically, so we would not have to work with MSHDA in the state, which tends to add a couple of years to any development, so that possibly this could move ahead a bit faster than the Lot O development is currently moving. And so we did have a discussion about what this could be, at least provided our intent or input initially. Thank you.
Okay, go ahead.
Thank you. A few things. One, I think that we should move ahead with the environmental assessment. We need that to know more about the property regardless of what we do with it in the future. Whether we move forward with the RFP for workforce housing on this parcel or whether it turns into something else, we owe it to the public and we owe it to ourselves to know the full extent of the environmental damage and remediation plans that are necessary for it. So regardless, and that takes a while, and regardless of what we do with it, I think we should move forward with that. That would play into the RFP, which I would prefer, but it also would, if the commission decides not to move forward with that, however the city develops the property in the future, would also need to have that done as soon as possible, so that we know long-term, whether it's the facilities plan, joint facilities plan with the county, we need to know this information as soon as possible. The other thing related to the parcels, we keep kind of going back and forth on the 3 versus 1, and our initial idea behind the proposal was to leave it open for the developer or developers to decide, yes, absolutely, economy of scale, we all understand that, for combining it and just having one parcel developed. There has been some pushback in the community against sort of bigger one-building housing development, so this gives us the option if a developer comes forward with a great plan for smaller buildings next to each other on 3 parcels. But absolutely, we're open to either of those, but wanted to keep it open for the developer to bring back that option. So that would be part of the RFP, would be spelled out, those options would be in there. And I wish we didn't keep throwing around this number of 632 housing units. Yes, those are in the works, broadly speaking, many of which are not affordable, also maybe not workforce. Many are possibly short-term rentals. Many are caught up in lawsuits. This is something we have control over. Many of these other housing units are out there, there are various forms of progress, but this is something we have more control over, and that the control goes back to this other idea that keeps coming up of our disposal of property. I'm not necessarily interested in disposing of the property. We have an option to retain ownership of the property. There's so many forms of agreement with the developer that we can interact with. We have talked about all of these options before, and I hope that those are also on the table for discussion. in the RFP that this isn't necessarily a developer purchasing this property from us. If we retain ownership to some degree, it allows us to keep some deed restriction in there on how it's developed and how affordable the units will be maintained over the long term. We lose that control, of course, when we give up that, the control of the property. In terms of the snow storage, I know that was a big piece of this memo, and I'm happy to hear that DPW and other city staff, working creatively to find a better long-term solution anyway. So this just, like you mentioned, Mayor, this was a short-term spot for snow anyway. So to kind of stick to that as the best place for snow is really a sad use of the property.
I agree.
And we keep also mentioning highest and best use. So we know we are not just in a housing crisis, but we are in a housing emergency. We weren't necessarily in the same predicament. It was also bad 4 years ago when this is purchased, but it's only gotten worse. Every day it's getting worse. So I think to keep referencing these 632 units is being disingenuous to the overall emergency that we are in the city. And this is something we have control over. We know it takes time, but by the time we get through this process, it may be October of 2023 anyway. But we need to get this started as soon as possible. If that means putting together a committee again to develop the RFP, I'm happy to serve on that. If that's what needs to happen, it feels like we learned a lot through the process last time that we can bring into this RFP. I don't know that we need to have a full committee again. I feel like staff and some of the history of folks who were served previously could help with that as well. So I urge us to move forward with this and make headway on something that we have control over, knowing full well the emergency situation that we're in for housing in our community.
Thank you. Mr. Warner, I did click the link they had on there, but the memo from September 15th did make it quite clear that this was the development of workforce housing in your original memo.
Yes.
Thank you.
No, and I just wanted to comment because to Commissioner Walters' point about how we could proceed forward and what we've learned from Lot O, and I think we've learned quite a bit. And I think Mission North with Rob Bacigalupi has a very good understanding of that. And the feedback that I've heard, and I'm sure he has more feedback, is that price point. Like, what are we willing to sell it for? And I had thought that we went through it, because I was part of that interview committee, with a clear expression that we were open to different price points. But it's been brought back to me and made clear that, no, there were some, not quite, we'll just say that, not quite, it wasn't clear enough. It could be clearer.
Correct.
So for
That's
this
what
time around, I mean, that's one of the main learning points, and I think that's pretty straightforward, and Mr. Bacigalupi's well aware of it, to clarify that it's just proposals. So if somebody wants to make an offer to buy that for $1, it's got to be a whiz-bang proposal, what they're trying to do, if it's going to convince us to sell it for $1. Somebody else might offer what they might say fair market value, which is $500,000-$600,000 nowadays, and theirs maybe doesn't have to be quite so whiz-bang to compete with the other one. But I think that can all be built in, and I trust that Mr. Bacigalupi is, again, well aware of that and can manage.
And again, the only other part of it is that, what is that price point, or someone who has it that's going to rent it, who's going to control the rents, what is that number? And, because I could say, well, if you're making X, then you should be able to afford this. I don't know. And I don't know of any other matrix out there, but there is one that should be incorporated or into something. However, they're going to say, what am I going to rent these for? If you do Y, or, if you give it to $1, we'll do this.
I guess I see it the other way around.
Okay.
We, the city commission and the city, hopefully receive proposals, and we look at it. We see what they're proposing, what their intent is, how it doesn't turn into a trailside 45, like how it's locked in for whatever duration, at what price points, see what comes in. And we can always decide, you know what, we're not interested in any of these. You know, apparently we will have to work with MISTA if we want something that rises to the level of approval of 5 of us up here. So by moving it forward, we're just saying we're interested. Let's keep this process moving, and built into it as well can be just like the sale of anything. If I, you know, sell my house, inspections. So essentially the soil, geotechnical things, those can all be built into this process, you know, contingent upon what is found, because it will take time. I mean, if nothing else, we've learned that from Lot G and Lot O, they take time, and this will take time. I'd love to hear what others might think.
Ms. Shamro.
No, Mark had his hand up first.
Okay. Like I agree with what Commissioner Werner's saying, and then also to speak to your point for like how do we come up with the price to decide what affordable is. I mean, it should be a simple formula for our area based on like what the income is for your average worker, and try to keep that within 30% of their household income. And if somebody can work out a deal where they can guarantee that the rents will stay at that, I'd be agreeable.
Ms. Shamro.
So I was going to say, first of all, I agree with Commissioner Walters' points that before we do anything, we have to know what the value is and do some of these testings or this fact-finding. And so I think that that's important we do no matter what happens next. But I appreciate Commissioner Warner bringing it back to the original point of the memo, which was the workforce housing. I wish Rob was here to ask a couple questions because, you know, we had some presumptions last time we had this discussion about we don't need that legal finding, and then Rob's informed us, well, no, we do before we put an RFP because the people will ask and it'll make an issue of the RFP process anyway. So I feel like I wish I could ask him, but I feel like that might actually be part of what would happen. We can say right now, well, we guess it's probably about 500,000. We can put this condition in the RFP, but I guess I would hesitate to put out an RFP that's going to probably just be rejected by everybody when the goal of the people who are pushing or who want it is to actually get something put there. And so I'm, you know, this is kind of on here, even though some people have emailed us about it being a, you know, action tonight. It's really kind of up here as an update. And so I just wanted to kind of point that out and just say I think there are still some questions I would have if we were going out to RFP for the person who'd be putting the RFP together. So just putting that into the conversation as we move this along.
Anybody else?
No, back,
Mitchell
sir.
wants to say something.
No, go ahead.
Yes, I appreciate the idea of using city property to promote housing. I'm on the Housing Commission, which is looking at a number of potential opportunities, including the TCAP's headquarters as locations for new housing in our downtown area. Though I do have concerns about this particular location in both its suitability for housing and whether it's really the best use for the city's goals. In terms of the suitability, as was referenced in the memo, DPS has concerns about the noise and other fringe effects of its operations there, which I can definitely see as, especially if we are putting lower income people here, that being a less desirable neighborhood, well, parcel, not even a neighborhood, a less desirable and enjoyable place to live if they have to put up with much higher noise and vibrational energies than people might experience in other parts of town. Also, with considerations talking to the developers for, say, Ruth Park, if we are going through MISTA or similar policies, they generally would prefer to have construction further away from sources of heavy vibration or industrial activity, like our DPW building, or like the railroad on the other side. Yes, we currently see maybe 30 trains a year, but if we are interested in increasing that, then there will be potentially more train traffic coming through there. And it's generally recognized in other urban environments that you don't want housing right next to the train tracks. Also, there's overhead utilities running through there that would either present further troubles if they get buried, or they'd present limitations for development with regard to height or other factors in terms of just how developable this parcel is. On the other side, for our own city operations, there is a lot to be said for having a centrally located facility that handles a lot of various concerns of city function, which is why both the city and the county are sharing this building. If we have, for snow storage or other equipment staging, other needs for Department of Public Works, there isn't a whole lot of other land, especially if they need it to be accessible to both sides of town, that it works better than this. And if we do need additional land at some later time, chances are it won't be whenever and wherever we see fit, and it would probably be at a higher price. In terms of snow storage, I fully accept that we can be forward-thinking and come up with more creative solutions about where and how that snow gets stored, but at present there are a limited number of places where we have access to put snow without hauling it outside of the city limits to Keystone, which does add cost. And especially if we are looking at developing the or potentially changing the cemetery property over from snow storage to development or other usage in the future, I don't see it as being in the city's best interest until we have some plan forward to pursue both of those avenues, which would greatly reduce the options for where we put our snow.
Thank you. Anybody else? Mr. Warner?
Yeah, I'll go back to, it's easy to find the no. It's easy to just find whether it's a big, medium, small size thing, a reason to vote no. It's hard to find the yes. But we do have a housing emergency, not just a housing crisis. And if we are to move this forward, we're not committing to anything. We're just saying this is a priority and we want to continue to move it forward and explore it. And so with that, I will make the motion that the city manager proceed with the assistance from Mission North LLC to draft and issue RFPs by December 19, 2022 for redevelopment of the 3 contiguous parcels along Beitner Street and Woodmere Avenue, with clear intent that the received proposals will be evaluated based on maximizing the number of residential units, minimizing the carbon footprint, and intentionally creating community.
Second.
Okay. We have a motion and a second. All right. Anyone else from the public like to make a comment? Yes, ma'am. Please come up. You want to read the rules for public comment, please? Or have we already done that?
Nope, I'm reading. We ask that you state your name and address, indicate if you are a city resident, non-city resident, and/or city business owner. We have a 3-minute time allotment per speaker. When your time has elapsed, the timer will beep. And finally, we request that all language be respectful to all parties.
Thank you. My name is Mary Van Valen, and I live on Webster Street in the city. Do you need my address?
No.
Okay. There's a song that says you can do this hard thing. And I think housing is complex in a city that doesn't have much land left. And I just want to say, we all want every child in our community to have a home to come home to after school and a bed to put their heads down on at night. And there are so many residents in our community for whom that is a daily struggle. And this is a community that does things right by our citizens. We always have. We've always tried to do right by everybody. And if we don't just face the complexity of it, the nasty soil it might be on, the noise of the railroad, whatever the complications, if not this spot, find a spot and let's build housing so that we can have the human need for a roof over the house met for our citizens. Otherwise, we're just going to be a gray-haired, rich mono community that's not very interesting. So I appreciate your efforts. I know it's hard, but I think there's a really high goal that we have homes for everyone, and we can do it, even if it's hard. Thank you.
Thank you. Anybody else? So that we can move this along, if you like, just kind of stand up behind.
Janine Easterday, 1011 Lake Ridge Drive, Traverse City. As I read through the city manager's memo and listened to the conversation, I do absolutely agree with the concept of the further assessment and a management plan that Commissioner Walters stressed is very important. That should not necessarily impede movement towards an RFP. Those are things that are going to have to be done. One thing that I didn't hear discussion on that I think is very important in terms of stakeholders and buy-in from stakeholders is making some connection to developers in the area. They know dollars and cents. They know what can and can't happen. They will certainly give you their opinion. And if they feel they're left out of the process, they might be here with their pitchforks at some point. So I do appreciate the comments about the snow removal and the other kinds of operational difficulties because they can be worked through with some creativity and some need to get to yes. And I just can't help but make a comment about the trains. I live about 100 yards away from the train in a complex of developments that's going anywhere from $350,000 to $650,000 a unit. I also live on the trail by 16th Street where there is a group of I believe they're condos, possibly short-term rentals, I can't believe they're not, that are going for $699,000. I also ride my bike along the trail to the south over by Rose Street, and I see a lot of complex of relatively what appear to be somewhat inexpensive for the city housing. So I don't think trains are a detriment to housing. In fact, I think personally trains are romantic. So I really encourage the commission to move forward and stay on top of this. If you set a priority, you really need to keep with the movement. Thank you.
My name's Ryan Hannon, 2279 South Airport Road. I'm not a city resident, but I spend a lot of time with people experiencing homelessness that are living in the city limits. And I just wanted to say thank you all for your commitment to housing and homelessness and each and every one of your commitment to that and thoughtfulness and discussion on this matter. For me and the people I serve, anywhere for a place to live in these times and circumstances are good, and there's plenty of people that would take a place no matter where in the city. However, I'm not here to argue for and against any certain locations, but I do want to comment about the 632 units, and I appreciate the development of those in our community. I often wonder how many of those are dedicated for homelessness, if any of them are. A property being developed can have a preference for homelessness even without, say, MSHDA or HUD funds. through a partnership with the Northwest Michigan Coalition to End Homelessness. We have an example of that with the Common Grounds Place, where it's not developmental dollars as part of it, but part of the rental dollars that the coalition has that's allocated to our community for rent to help people that have no income and are living homeless can be used for that. It just wouldn't be part of the development of it. We heard the previous speaker share lots of high-income unit places that sounded really good, and I think developers might like the sound of dollars as well. And how can we use that opportunity to also include the preference for homelessness and things for these housing? Thank you again for all your hard work and commitment to this very tough issue, and thanks for hanging together on it.
Anybody else? Okay. Can I ask a quick question, Mr. Warner? What date did you have?
December 19th, I believe that's their second business meeting, and that way, instead of just a month,
Got it, I just want to
there
make
would
sure.
be 2 months
I just
to
think- Got it. Okay.
work through things.
We have a
Yes.
commissioner.
Yes.
So I just want to make a couple comments. Again, after our last time this was brought up, I followed up with Rob Bachgalupi and asked him, because we were told, well, we don't need the answer to that legal question about the contract before we'd go out to an RFP. And when I talked to him afterwards, he said, no, we would need that before we go out to an RFP. And so I see, again, as I raised the point earlier, there's some questions that I'd have here. Do we need to have this study done first before we put out the RFP? I don't, voting on something to have it then blow up in our face or not go forward doesn't get the project done. Getting the information we need to get the projects out gets the projects done. And, to Mary's comment, we want the housing to happen where it can happen. And doing that, cutting corners and making votes to go on some scoreboard doesn't get the housing happen if we don't have the right information to get the right RFPs, or we put an RFP out and nobody bids on it because we don't have the right information. We need to make sure we're doing these in whole pieces. And, to Commissioner Warner's comment about there's always a reason for no, I have not really experienced a lot of that in the 7 years I've been up here. We've pursued O, we've pursued G. We did the whole study of all the properties that people said, well, why are you doing that? The city shouldn't give up these parking lots. And we've always said yes to those. So I don't think that us saying, let's do these right, let's be deliberative, maybe this isn't the right property, but let's find another one, wherever these discussions take us, I don't think that's finding a reason for no. I think it's finding a reason for yes to the right projects that are going to actually help our community and get the right RFPs. And maybe it is this one, and maybe it is going to happen by December 19th, or maybe it happens January 19th, because we've waited on a study to be done. I just don't think that this, it's now or never if we don't have all the right information is the best way to do it, because we might be alienating a developer, somebody who would want to do it, but doesn't want to get involved if they're going to have to do a bunch of legwork and then possibly have it fall through anyways. So I just wanted to say that as we contextualize this discussion, that there's nuances in here that we, as was pointed out again by Mary, it's a complex issue, and sometimes the complexity slows us down a little, but it doesn't mean that we don't want to say yes at the end of the day.
So are you making a friendly amendment related to that?
I'm just saying, I'm going to vote no until we get the information from Rob for the RFP.
I'm not going to change her vote, but I guess to reassure others, these are professionals that we would be working with. They're not naive. They will go back and watch this. They will read all the documentation. They know that soil geotechnical analysis will be done. And there's ways to address that as far as the process moving forward. So things aren't going to blow up in our face. There's not an old factory on that location that needs to be demolished or taken down at the cost of the buyer. So to me, there's not a risk as far as moving this forward. Not a risk that rises to the level that the professionals out there as developers, that they would be scared away.
I'm asking a question. Is this a 4 vote or a 5 vote? Because we're asking somebody that's outside of our preview to do work which we have to pay.
If this would require an amendment to the contract with Mission North, it would require 5 votes. If it doesn't require an amendment, if that's already within the scope of what that agreement is, which I don't know as I sit here, then it would require 5 votes. Is that, or did I say that backwards?
No.
Yeah, I came into this thinking it was 4 votes.
Yeah, I'm
and
just
that
asking the question
Right.
now before I walk
Yeah.
in here, because I don't know what
Yeah.
I wasn't here when Rob was hired, so I don't know where
He was hired for the others, and he's currently being employed to work on a housing fund, which is being done at the city manager's discretion without our request.
That's correct.
So by the same token, he could be working on this.
I don't think this is an amendment to a contract.
I don't know. That's what okay.
So we'll treat it as not one.
Okay. Because it just hit me, and that's where we are. Okay. Anybody else, please? Yes, sir, Mr. Treadwell.
Yes, just to clarify my comments about trains, I like trains too. I do hope to ride a train out of Traverse City at some point. But the issue is not with trains in the general proximity, but specifically if you're building within 50 foot of an active rail line. For MISTA and for other agencies, they generally discourage that, which for the case of Ruth Park, which is a rather similar footprint in terms of their building lot to some of these parcels, necessitated them pulling back some of their designs about 5 feet.
Okay. All right. Anybody else? All right. We have a motion on the floor. Do we need to read it again? Because it wasn't in this packet. You had to go back to the link they had there. Do you want to hear it again, or are you good?
That's where you got
I'm just asking the group
I'm
here.
good.
Okay. You're good. All right. All those in favor of the motion say aye.
Aye.
All those opposed say nay.
Nay.
All right. Roll call, please.
Mayor Pro Tem Shamrow,
No.
Commissioner Wilson,
Yes.
Commissioner Stanley,
No.
Commissioner Walter,
Yes.
Commissioner Treadwell,
No.
Commissioner Werner,
Yes.
Mayor.
No. Think the motion fails?
3-4.
Okay. I'd like to make a separate motion. I'd like to direct that the city manager move forward with getting the, I got to go back to my original thing here. Go back and get the, pointed out in item number 1 as it relates to getting the soils and environmental all completed, and to come up with bullet points as it relates to an RFP to be brought back to us at our December 19th meeting for further discussion.
I'd support that motion or make it if we need to, but I think that's just instruction to staff, so we don't actually have to make a motion for it.
Well, I'm trying to put a date when it will be back here.
Well, that's, yeah.
If I may,
Yes?
in terms of some of the soil and environmentals to be completed by that date, I would seriously doubt we can get it done that fast.
Okay.
Just telling you,
Well, I
that's
tell
the
you what.
contractors that we have available to us.
Let's just say that's what we'd like to see happen. Give us an update within 2 weeks, please, by memo. Whether it
Second.
can- We don't get a second on that.
Well, you made a motion.
Well, I'll withdraw my motion, because if you can't have it here by the 19th, December 19th, it doesn't do. Just let us know whether you can have it back on our agenda by the 19th and where things stand.
We can do that.
But let us know before then. If it is, it'll be on our agenda on the 19th for further discussion. Then we may move forward with the RFP. Okay.
I'm not clear on what
Me neither.
exactly you're asking then, because you had said a couple things in the motion that you retracted.
What I'd like to do is get the first item as it relates to the soils and the environmental work completed and done, so we know what we're dealing with on that piece of property.
And you wanted an update in 2 weeks, so on what that process was. I kept hearing 2 weeks too, I'm
Well,
confused.
what
like
I'm
Commissioner
wanting
Walter.
is, he's saying it can't be done. Until he asks these folks, can it be done?
Right.
I don't know that. But if he has a date to say, can you have this completed and in our hands for discussion on December 19th, then he knows he can move forward with it.
Do we also need an appraisal, or because it was, she's nodding her head, because it was purchased 4 years ago? Or should we also direct? I would then add that, to add the appraisal to the list.
Okay. What I'm trying to do is to meet that we have more information for further discussion on the 19th of December, possibly, as soon as we can get it.
I was going to ask, I'm okay with moving forward requesting an appraisal, but last time that took quite a while, and also to what end? So we get an appraisal, like we did just buy it recently, relatively, for a given amount. Whether it appraises at 800,000 or 400,000, does that change how we move forward? And I don't need an answer, just to ponder that, because maybe it's going to take time, and will we hold things up waiting for an answer on an appraisal? So just for people to take that home and ponder it.
And also, you'll have your more formative answer for an RFP, what you have to have about the sale or whatever in a more formal discussion. So a lot of things you heard here tonight that we hope to have back to us by the 19th. We know more about the property, what we can and can't do, and then we can come back and discuss about going out for an RFP. That we have the information in our hands, and I like to do it, hopefully, but, well, it may be Ms. Walker's last meeting. Hopefully, it's her last meeting.
Yes, with the best of intention behind that. Thanks.
You know, that could go out 2 ways, can't it? No. Dang, I got that one in. All right. No, you know what I mean. So I like to have that discussion while we have this body here, and then we can take that. So it hasn't stopped. We haven't said yay or we haven't said no yet. We're just going to continue to have the discussion. So, but we'll know more than we know now.
Can we also bring back more information on our contract with Mission North? Is that Rob's company?
Yeah,
Mission
well,
North?
that's what yeah, and if you need us to do something, let us know, please.
We
And
can
it could be
clarify
within your,
If we need to clarify the contract to work on the RFP.
To know what the scope is and
Yeah.
figure that out. Yep, no problem.
I don't want to get into something where somebody else comes up and said, well, we violated something. We don't need to.
Right, that's why I'm trying to get all those things out there so that people at that point won't say, well, you should also do this and you should also do that.
I agree, thank you. I think I got most of them in my head. Do you have them, sir?
Yes.
The three of you got them all kind of written down between the three of you.
I
You'll
think we
get
took good notes.
Okay, got it, thanks. We don't need any motions. Okay, thanks. All right, with that, next item is to consider concurring with the recommendation of the Downtown Development Authority as it relates to implementing a 2-year pilot as it relates to converting State, Pine, and Boardman to two-way. So in this one, I know we had a very lively discussion last week on this particular topic. I believe also you have an updated, wait a minute, let me back up here. Was this the same memo? This was the same memo that we had last week, is it not?
No, they added more information.
Oh, they did add more, so you have an updated memo on that. So do you want to bring this up, or?
Certainly, I'll just introduce it in the sense of, this has been, we've had, I believe, 2 formal discussions as a body to discuss this, and has been worked on through the DDA board and approved by the DDA board in concept. The initial discussion was broader and narrowed down to State Street. Originally, the initial discussions had included Front Street, and that had been deleted. That being said, I'll introduce Gene Dorenzi, the CEO of the DDA.
Thank you, Marty. Again, my name is Jean Dorenzi. I'm the CEO of the Traverse City Downtown Development Authority, and this evening we have an opportunity to explore a generational change focused on creating vibrancy, creating a better pedestrian experience, encouraging slower-moving vehicles, and investing in future economic outcomes for Traverse City, and is in line with the City Commission's goals, priorities, and actions as identified in your memo. As you know, and as outlined in your packet, the DDA has worked on this, and you have the history, but I also want to take a little time to identify some of the outreach that we did do throughout since 2021. We've had over 20 meetings in August, September, and November of 2021. And we've had over 220 participants in those public outreach meetings. The DDA is committed and continues to be committed to have public outreach and engagement. Specifically on this, when it comes to such a generational change, it's important to have the business community, the community at large, to be part of the discussion, and that we did. The DDA works on behalf of the downtown to study, investigate, and make recommendations to improve upon a continually works towards a thriving downtown. This two-way pilot project on State Street in Pine in Boardman does not just look at the economics, we looked at pedestrians, access to and connections and experience. This pilot is not stagnant, but one that can change when needed. A pilot that provides an opportunity to look and consider different approaches to better our community. As identified, this pilot that would be implemented is an iterative approach, meaning there would be data collected throughout and changes made to improve upon and implement as needed. The health of our business community and pedestrians, as they are all part of a cohesive downtown, that must include connections and vibrancy. We have a vision, but that vision does not happen overnight, and it certainly is not going to happen completely in the 2-year pilot. But it will provide us an opportunity to look and improve upon the pedestrian experience in the business community within our city and our downtown. We have, and part of this is to develop within those first 2 years the sustainability of the changes that we know that are coming and have the ability to have those special events and understand the road closure and the connectivity of those road closures and the bridge closures as well. I will highlight again the key matrices that we will look at for those iterative changes. Those are pedestrian volumes, the bicycle volumes, the crash data, the traffic speed, the traffic volumes, and snow removal level of service. The DDA is here with the recommendation with strong support from city staff and the community and businesses to ask for your approval. This is your street, your vote, and this is your pilot. It's not the DDA's. The DDA works tirelessly at approaches to better identify constant change that we know is coming, from bridge construction to Grandview Parkway construction, as sustainability is key to success. On behalf of the DDA board, I am asking for your approval for a 2-year pilot project with data points collected and modifications made based on the data that we have collected. I really do appreciate your time for these past 2 study sessions and having the ability to get your questions. And I know this is a significant change, but change is needed when we're looking at a downtown that is ever changing as well. So thank you for your time and consideration.
Thank you, Mr. Renzi. Okay, I know, yes, sir.
Yeah, I had the opportunity to explain to a constituent a couple of weeks ago my thoughts on this because she had asked me, like, what's going on, what's up? And part of the explanation and what I'll share is that if there was zero cost to this, I would probably say, sure, why not? But there is a cost. It's changed. It's come down to 128,000. I don't know where it's at, 128, 140,000, somewhere in that range. But it costs money. And we hear about snow storage and snow removal. And 2 weeks ago, maybe, or not the most recent time, maybe it was the time before this was in front of us, we were talking about trees up here, and that DDA had money in the budget for trees, but removed that money because they needed to address trash. So money is needed for other things as well. It's not that, oh, we have so much money, we don't know what to do with it, let's just do this. Again, if it was free, I'd probably support it, but it costs money, and there are other priorities. And something that came up at the last meeting was the cost of annual additional annual cost for snow removal. And there wasn't a clear answer given. It was, well, I think 40,000 a year for this first year, and we'll see what happens after that. Like maybe we'll come up with better ways to remove it. But if we go with 40,000 a year, moving forward, treat it as an annuity and a net present value, that's almost $500,000 we're committing additional, essentially the cost of doing this. And that's just not, we kind of dance around that, push it to the side and say, isn't this wonderful? Why don't we just do it? And yeah, maybe it is wonderful, but there's a cost to it. And back to some of my arguments at the previous meeting, the reasons for doing this, the two main ones initially, were traffic calming and economic development. And I spent plenty of time at the previous meeting essentially saying that there's a lack of reasoning. It doesn't get us there. And so I don't need to repeat that. And then finally, though, my final comment is back to Progressive AE. I mean, their fingers are all over this. They came to town, East Front Street, acted as though they didn't know that we were committed to active transportation, came up with a design that didn't have a bike lane or any bike lanes, and then acted confused and startled when there was pushback about that and said, well, maybe we could sell you this. How about a study? And we look at circulation and that sort of thing. I feel like they're just trying to keep themselves in business by offering us more things to spend money on. If we should move this forward, chances are they're the ones that will be collecting the data and helping to analyze it and make recommendations moving forward. So I'd be wary of Progressive AE. Thank you.
Okay. Yes.
I would like Mr. Enzi or somebody else from your team to share with us, for our sake, for the public's sake, we have a lot of big projects coming that will impact the flow around downtown for pedestrians, for cars, related to Grandview Parkway, the bridges, and how will this pilot help kind of mitigate some of that disruption? Because I kind of feel like this is pushed up as a priority to help with that situation that's coming. And I just want to understand a little bit more about how that will interplay.
I will have, if okay, Tim Lodge come up to be able to do this traffic circulation, but it did help. It will help with the traffic circulation for Grandview Parkway. But it wasn't moved up because of the Grandview Parkway. It was moved up because of the 2020 successful implementation of two-way. That we knew based on those matrix that State Street did slow. And there was some iterative changes that we could make, but we couldn't make at the time because it was just a summer that we could implement the two-way pilot on State Street. But knowing Grandview Parkway came up and in living the experience of the bridges in 2020 being closed, the connection in the grid system was incredibly important to really help the downtown. So with that, I'll have Tim talk about how this will help with Grandview Parkway.
Hi, Tim Lott, City Engineer. So we encourage this through the process, the public engagement process, because it gives us more options, it gives us more flexibility, it gives us more resiliency throughout all the different changes that we're making. So it provides another way to get around, where currently we have to use the North Alley to get around, especially if Front Street is closed. So if we're going to continue the vibrant events that we had on Front Street, when we closed Front Street, we looked at that and says, we really need to have another easterly route other than the alleyways. So when we did State Street, there was tremendous support. So, but it was unusual conditions. So the pilot really is about trying to figure out, did what we see in 2020, was it real? Were the benefits and success and ability for getting around improved to the extent that we thought it was? And also then on the ends, we kind of had it was an interior, location. So we want to try to make those connections to the exterior to evaluate, so what does it mean for, say, the neighborhoods or the connections, on the west side of town out to Front Street, so we could really study it some more. So it seemed to be a really good trial, but it was kind of in the middle. So the idea is to try to bring that connectivity back by able to go the other direction on State Street. Look at some of the things that we like to look at. I've got a whole host of, wants and desires for conducting the traffic studies that the city engineering department would do, not necessarily Progressive AE. We have a fully equipped staff. We just hired Kyle Kobilski, and he's just finished his first year, and his main focus is traffic engineering that we're trying to get to. We had a lot of construction, so really looking forward to this next year where we can bring him in and have some additional education and training for him, as well as opportunity to really look at this pilot and look at things like turning radiuses on the current lane configurations we have. When we allow people to turn right on infrastructure that wasn't designed to turn right, what does that mean? Does it mean that the cars turn and go across the lane, things like that? So we're trying to evaluate those types of things and see about, how do we make it, what impacts do we do? If we keep the lane widths the same and we have parking along the lane, is it a slower speed than if we have a bike lane along the lane? Which I think we're going to find that the lane that has the parking is going to be slower than the lane that has the bike lane. That's what we've been finding everywhere on our other studies that we do. So just interesting to try it. I'm excited to try it. I think it's, it's been, I believe the year is 1967. It's been controversial, and this is, to me, an exciting trial. It has its risks, but if we don't ever try it, then I would ask the question, then when? This is a good opportunity ahead of some major impacts. The Grandview Parkway project is going to effectively have a one-lane detour, and we know that getting eastbound is going to be very challenging. So.
Well, that's what I was hoping you would speak to a little bit more. I don't know that my question was really answered yet.
So so you're looking for the benefit for the Grandview Parkway is right now we have the eastbound traffic is going to remain on the Parkway, and the westbound traffic is going to come effectively through town and get back on at the Holiday Inn or the Del Mar. So the idea we're trying to do is provide that the westerly connections that we need to provide that won't be available on the Parkway.
And what about with the other bridge construction?
So the bridge constructions are in the immediate vicinity of that, and it'll give us more resiliency with the grid, so you can turn where you can't turn if you want to get around town without having to go all the way around the loop.
Okay, thank you.
Okay. Look at me like I was going to do something.
If I may.
Yes.
To that, I guess, kind of a follow-up question. My understanding is west of the Delamar, there will be an eastbound and a westbound lane available on the Parkway. So how is it that having a westbound lane on State Street, I guess I'm trying to help understand the answer to Commissioner Walter's question. I get it east of the Delamar when westbound traffic is through city streets, but once we get west of the Delamar, westbound Parkway traffic is back on the Parkway. There's one lane going each direction. So again, how does the new westbound lane on State Street, what is it for? Kind of why?
Do you want to respond?
It provides the connections that we can go westbound without having to go out there into a congested construction zone.
All right. Any other questions for Mr. Renzi?
If I can just comment relative to Commissioner Warner identified the trees were removed from the DDA's budget for trash. That was not the way. Remember the service agreement that I referred to? This was part of the service agreement that we're entering into with the city of Traverse City for trees and snow removal and trash removal. So even though it's not removal of trees. The DDA has worked on a tree survey, has worked with DPS to get the trees replaced and removing the dead trees and placing new trees in. So that statement was not quite the way that it was intended.
Okay. All right, any other questions?
I had a follow-up about the bike lanes. I'm trying to remember here. Oh, here we go. Sorry. I was on East Front today, and looks nice, by the way. New pavement and everything. A little bit better. And I had asked a question about width of lanes, width of bike lanes, and width of parking proposed in the pilot relative to Front Street. And it sounds like widths on Front vary between 11 and 12, some parts measuring 11 and a half. But on East Front, there's two-way traffic and 2 bike lanes, or bike lane on each side, and parking. So I'm confused on what this information is referencing. Because it's, it's told, well, we can't do 2 lanes on State because we don't have the room for it. But how does that compare to East Front Street, just west of Boardman, or east of Boardman?
So on East Front Street, we have a bike lane going west all the way to over the bridge on Front Street. And then on State Street, we have 1 lane, a dedicated bike lane on State Street.
Yep, but on East Front, we have a bike lane on both sides.
So on East Front Street, from Boardman to Railroad?
Yep.
So you're saying on, which is two-way?
Which is two-way.
But on, my understanding is that State Street, we could not, because of the door swings, could not have bike lanes on both sides.
But it's that way on East Front.
But the measurement's a little different based on the location. So when we talked to city engineering, that it's not a complete 11 feet, 12 feet. It changes based on how far you go down. So it's not similar throughout the whole street. So what we
State
have.
Street isn't, you mean?
State Street isn't, nor East Front Street or Front Street itself. But what we have committed to, Commissioner Walter, is that we are keeping that dedicated bike lane on State Street. So we have a west and an east. And we are looking at the mobility plan that is currently underway to implement the mobility plan when that mobility plan is complete. So if they say the mobility plan, it's two-way. You have to have, for transportation, you should have bike lanes on both sides, then it's bike lanes on both sides. We have committed to that, the DDA is committed to that, but we want to, for the reiterative, we want to have what we have now and improve upon as we move forward. But I also want to respect that we have an expensive mobility plan that we're doing. How are we implementing that when those results come out? So to put two bike lanes on State Street that you're identifying at this time does not work. And I can't tell you why, but I have to rely on the professionals, the engineers, to identify that.
I'm not sold on that,
I can't-
considering my experience on East Front today with two-way traffic, 2 parking lanes, and 2 bike lanes. And we just repaved it and restriped it. And it seems to be working fine. Slowing traffic. So I don't understand why we wouldn't start with that in the iterative process. And then the mobility plan can help inform the next iteration. I'm not sold on why we can't start with that.
I can't, I'm not I'm not an engineer, but I do rely on that professional expertise, Commissioner Walter.
Okay.
I just have a
I have a
follow-up
doubt.
question to Commissioner Walters really quickly, because I got confused with when you were talking about, because Commissioner Walter was talking about the new section of East Front Street, but then you were saying that the widths change. So State Street, is it narrower at different parts than that portion of East? Okay, I'm seeing Tim Lodge nodding his head yes. So that's why the extra lane won't fit, is because it's not the same widths to reconfigure everything? Correct, I'm hearing, okay.
Maybe he can provide some clarification on that.
Like, what are the widths?
What kind of clarification are you looking for? They're not the same widths.
So what are the differences then?
The East State Street part is wider than the State Street part, except for the part that we rebuilt over between Pine and around the first part. That we increased the bike lane width, and at the expense of the travel lane width for that section. So, and it's a wider section. So it's a matter of feet. I would really think, what we're trying to evaluate is the change to go to the two-way direction at a larger area from the 2020 study. I'd like to evaluate that. And then by that time, we should see the mobility plan come our way. And we will be able to look at those challenges there. We're also evaluating East State Street. Our number one bicycle-involved accident is the door swing. So we're also looking to see, what has that created. That section's been in place for a few years, so we'll have up to 5 years of data, which is what we like to look for crash data. So we'll bring that out and look as well, but it is if we start with something that is at the minimums, we put things at risk, and that would be the bicyclists at risk. And I really don't want to do that without knowing the complete study on East Front Street, as well as, looking at other things that we need to evaluate on State Street in its current configuration, especially the wider bike lane option, as well as the door swing options that we're looking at for this trial.
What's the width of those bike lanes on East Front, just for my
I can follow up with the information. We have the whole plan from West End through, so I just don't know. It varies in different locations. As Commissioner Werner can attest, as he's measured them, and when it says it's 5 feet, a lot of times it gets painted at 4 feet. So I don't have that off the top of my head. But in general, we strive for a minimum of 4 foot. But then that does put people at risk for the door swings. We'd like to see 5 to 6 feet is our current hope, especially adjacent to parking. And there isn't the room adjacent to do that. So we'd be at minimums, and that would put people at risk, and we don't want to do that for the trial period.
Mr. Mayor?
Yes.
Okay. So currently, there's just one lane going one way down State Street for the bike?
Correct.
And there's one lane going west on Front Street?
Correct.
And if we don't do this two-way, we still have one lane going east on State Street?
Correct. And the other part about it is our observations is that it's a multi-way lane most of the time. People go both directions.
Yeah. Wait, so people do come
People go
west
both, whether
on the
it's not
one-way-
signed that way, but people go both directions.
Yeah,
That's
I've
one
seen
of-
that on Front. I just figured that's just people not
State
going with the
Street, I
flow,
see.
and they just do what they want.
It's a frequent occurrence that I observe. Someone coming the wrong way down there
I
on
frequently see cars go the wrong way.
on a bike, on a
Front Street,
scooter.
too, so.
Yeah.
there's
So,
that.
and again, I think that's part of the observations that we'll make is, let's leave it where it is, and let's look at the observations. Maybe we start to talk about this protected bike lane, but maybe it's a little wider, and, maybe it's, the trial, we go through the winter, then sometime, in July or so, when we've got a lot of data, we have some discussions, maybe we look at shifting it, maybe we talk about a protected bike lane on that, where we allow things to go back and forth. Those are the types of things I'd like to see the current configuration with the vehicular movements of the laneage, especially the right turns, just to see where can we go, what can we make narrower, and things like that. Because we might be able to do something to move forward. But the mobility plan will give us the why we're doing it. So having the desire to have why are we doing the bike lane or other things, the bias that I have for the downtown is walking. Bike lanes there are provisions for the trail network and for other routes through town, and that should be bore out through the mobility plan. So looking forward to getting that information so we can kind of see the why we would want to do enhanced bike facilities and what they are through the mobility plan.
Okay. Any other questions?
Mr. Renzi and I had a conversation about the snow plowing, so will you share that with the group, what we talked about? Because I think it addresses some of the concerns related to the costs that were referenced.
Yes. Nicole Van Ness attended the Snow Summit and she looked and identified that the snow plowing and the closing would not happen because they're looking at the best practice and knowing what they do. So it's probably not going to be the closing of the street, it's windrowing. Maybe State Street would be first, but the contractor would determine the best approach to remove that snow. Is there anything that I missed on that, Nicole? If I missed anything.
I think the biggest thing from the meeting with the contractor and DPS is that over time, we're going to have to make changes. Not knowing State Street being two-way currently, the current conditions, the routes that we take in order to get them into the trucks to be hauled away. So over time, that might change, and that's something that until we're in it, knowing how much snow is going to fall this season, it may be light, it may be heavy, we'll continue to evaluate. And the plow drivers have done this for years, and so they're going to make their best attempt to continue to improve the process.
And keep it open. I mean, the idea is it'll most likely stay open, the lanes won't close. That's the goal.
That's the goal.
Okay. All right. We've had a lot of discussion on this. We've had a lot of answers tonight. Some of them, as I get into this, are going to change. I mean, that's why it's called, it's a pilot, and they don't need to wait until it gets real bad. If they feel like they need to change it, they should change it. So we hope that they will move forward with that and do it well if this is what we choose to do. The only thing I want to do is, if you want to consider the motion, the only part of the motion that I'd like to change is toward the last part, is saying that for a 2-year extension upon recommendation from the Downtown Development Authority Board of Trustees and approval of the City Commission. The DDA gives us recommendations, they don't give us approval, so, if you don't mind, just like we've done now. That's if you want to do that motion. Yes.
I'd be so moved. Do I need to repeat all that?
Well, I'll be glad to read it for you to see if this is what you meant to say.
Yeah.
That the City Commission authorizes the implementation of a 2-year pilot to convert State Street, Pine Street, and Boardman Avenue to two-way circulation with an option for a 2-year extension upon recommendation from the Downtown Development Authority Board of Trustees and approval of the City Commission.
That is what I said.
I thought that's what I heard. Second by Commissioner Stanley. Okay, any more discussion? All those in favor of the motion say aye. Aye. All those opposed say nay.
No.
Roll call, please.
Commissioner Wilson?
Yes.
Commissioner Stanley?
Yes.
Commissioner Walter?
Yes.
Commissioner Treadwell?
Yes.
Commissioner Werner?
No.
Mayor Pro Tem Shamrock?
Yes.
Mayor?
Yes. Okay, next item under our old business is an update of the 2023 Madison and Jefferson construction project. Let's see, from our, when was the last discussion we had on that? At our September 26th study session with this review, there were a number of questions asked. I see that the city engineer, Mr. Lodge, has attempted to the best of his ability to answer those questions. We know that we heard twice, just to bring back, we heard twice from the neighborhood president at our meetings, how much they appreciated the work that city engineering and the planning department did to work with them on this. So I was just glad to hear that they liked the community involvement, how they got done. So that was good news. So with that, any other questions that we may have? Then what we're looking for is they recommend to proceed forward with the tentative project schedule to secure materials and pricing. So I think the motion is that the city commission.
Richard, I think I was just about to make a
Okay, hang on. That the city commission conceptually supports the Madison and Jefferson reconstruction project. Yeah.
I'll make that motion.
Thank you. Support. You'll support it, Mr. Wilson. Okay. Any other questions? Yes, sir.
I know there was maybe some palpable tension in the room when this was last in front of us. And I went back and actually watched the video, which I don't know that I've ever watched ourselves again. But to me, speaking highly, if an engineer, any engineer, can't have their plan questioned and stand up to scrutiny, that's a sure sign that it's not a good plan. And to me, it's pretty clear that our engineering department does not have expertise with complete streets or green streets.
Okay. Again, I will disagree with you, but that's why there's 7 of us. We all don't always have to agree. Okay. Is there anyone else from the public that'd like to address this? Okay.
Looks like we have a commenter.
Oh, go ahead, sir.
Sam Shore, resident of Traverse City on Madison Street, and I'm here as the president of SNA, of the Slapdown Neighborhood Association. So at the risk of being redundant, I'll be brief. But I did want to reiterate that we have truly appreciated working with the city on this, and we're continuing to do that as this thing evolves. So we've spent countless hours, it feels like, going through, forming our questions, getting them answered, looking at the design features and understanding them. So we're happy with those. I will say that one issue that has emerged as of last week, we've had a resident say, hey, I'm really worried about the sidewalk on Jefferson and what it's going to do to our mature trees there. So we have reached out to engineering. We've reached out to Parks and Recreation and talked to the directors in both about that. And so there's ongoing discussions around what kind of options do we have. We appreciate that. That's been the nature of the work and the interaction all along for the past year on this. So we really look forward to your support for moving it ahead. Thank you.
You're welcome. Okay. Any other comments? Yes. Here we have a motion, and we have a second. All those in favor of the motion say aye. Aye. All those opposed say nay.
No.
Roll call, please.
Commissioner Stanley?
Yes.
Commissioner Walter?
Yes.
Commissioner Treadwell?
Yes.
Commissioner Werner?
No.
Mayor Pro Tem Shamrock?
Yes.
Commissioner Wilson?
Yes.
Mayor?
Yes. All right. We're under new business. We have a presentation from Traverse City Connect's annual report by CEO Warren Call. Thank you, Warren, for your patience. Oh, young man, we have a student here that would like to get a statement signed. Do we want to take a 5-minute break? Let's take a 5-minute break if you don't mind, Mr. Call. Mr. Call?
Yeah, we can.
Come on up.
Yeah. Then
Give
you,
us a 5 minutes, please, for a quick break.
I'm sure you have other homework to do, so we'll get out of here. Well, there wasn't a good time, and I thought this might be a good time.
Yes, it was. It was very good. Thank you.
People here.
Thanks for coming.
It's been a while since we've had students.
Yeah, they just started that requirement again.
Oh, they just.
Yeah, with, COVID and everything.
Okay, so we're back.
Yep.
Okay.
Yeah, because they've been working on campaigns, and the officials and candidates have been going back into the classrooms, and that all just
Thank you for your indulgence, Mr. Warren. Okay, we're back in, Mr. Call. I hate it when I do that. Mr.
I
Call,
thought you were
thank-
indicating, Joe, that we were doing.
Okay.
It's not the worst thing I've been called.
Mr. Mark Mahoney.
Okay. With that, CEO Warren Call of Traverse Connect, would you please present your annual report to us? Thank you.
Yeah, thank you for the opportunity. Good evening, everyone. Per the terms of our development services contract, we are here to report on progress for the last year. As a reminder, the service contract that we have with the City of Traverse City for the 2021-2022 year outlined three areas of focus. One is a commercial and industrial development site program. The second of those was our Michigan's Creative Coast Entrepreneur and Talent Attraction Marketing Program. And the third was a broader economic and community development services working with the city on a whole host of items. So I'll touch briefly on some of the highlights from those things. I do not intend to go through the report in fine detail. You have it in your packet, and I would welcome any questions you may have, but I'll just touch on a couple of key highlights in the interest of time. Regarding the commercial and industrial site program, we did meet with and work with city staff on a list of sites that were of interest to the city for potential redevelopment. We also met with the owners of those sites on their interest in various types of projects and the uses of those sites. We compiled the sites into site profiles that were then published on the Thrive North website and were marketed as such. And then we have been taking interest in solicitations and inquiries on those sites, as well as other interests in other parts of the city and other development opportunities in the city. We've met with several companies from various industries that are interested in potential expansion or location to city property for business purposes, and we hosted a FAM tour, is the colloquial term, a familiarization tour for national level site selectors to educate them on the sites that are available in this region. On the entrepreneur and talent programs, I would focus on two things that we did, both in the talent development. We've had some really good success with working with NMC on the development of new programs and certificate programs and micro-credential programs that we believe are really at the cusp of what our businesses need. Not only did we get the needs of the businesses met, but we went back with NMC's help in the past after that initial outreach and got with them to survey the business community on the specific dates, times, and costs for providing some of those services. So we're able to go back to NMC and say, we need, a 3-hour block micro-credential program on Thursday afternoons that costs X amount. So it really gave the college some very specific things to work on. We continued to develop the budding partnership with Michigan Tech, their occupancy in our building, and some of the programs and research that they're developing with local business partners and other local partners in the community. And very excited to have the beginnings of instruction happening in that location as well, with their Tech MBA program being offered on-site in our building. The other thing that's interesting in talent development is a pilot project that we're just kicking off with Kingsley area schools on skilled trades. Think of it like a robotics program, but it's a shop club program or a skilled trades program. So that is just kicking off actually this week. So we're excited about that. As you've probably heard us describe in the past, the big issue with housing, in addition to many of the things you've already talked about today, is the lack of labor. And the best way to address that is, unfortunately, long-term by starting with middle and high school students and getting them more interested in the trades. So that's a long-term push, but we're excited about it. Under the talent attraction aspect of the program, I would highlight that our job board is ever more popular and getting a lot more visits, nearly 20,000 page views within the last year, and that continues to grow. I was actually speaking with a bioscience CEO from Silicon Valley earlier today, who's interested in potentially moving his business here. He was very interested to learn not just about the resources on Michigan's Creative Coast Job Board, but the other ancillary recruiting support that we've offered, including our new page outlining housing opportunities for anyone that may consider moving here. The other aspect of the Creative Coast is the Entrepreneur Success Story Marketing Program. The second appendix in the report contains some examples of the social media posting that we have done, both for city businesses as well as city cultural organizations. And that continues to, again, grow. All aspects of the Michigan's Creative Coast continue to see national level attention and utilization of the various resources that are there. We did do a specific marketing program targeting some metro areas in southern Michigan, and it was a pilot program, so there's more to be done here, but almost a 10% Google conversion rate. And for anyone that's not familiar with that, that's kind of a big deal to get that many people to actually take action from social media ads and digital display marketing. So we're excited about that, and that success and documented success actually allowed us to garner further support for this program, so that it's not just our local area that's going to help support that and sustain it, but the state has engaged with some funding to help support that continued national level marketing. In the economic and community development section of the report, there's a couple of things I would highlight. On issue advocacy, obviously, to be able to grow our economy here, we need to address some of the key barriers for businesses and their workforce. We were involved in the passage of a significant child care bill package at the state level. We were directly involved in the successful adoption and funding of the State Office of Rural Development, which is a new development. And we are directly involved in the key pending issue of a package of housing-related bills that unfortunately is delayed. And to be completely honest with you, both sides agree that it needs to happen, but neither one wants to give the other side a win before the election. So we are expecting that there will be movement on that shortly after the November election. Unfortunate that it has to wait for that kind of thing. But we also have been working with MSHDA, to some of the comments that were made earlier. There is unfortunate red tape and delays that oftentimes come from some of their programs. But in speaking with Gary Heidel this afternoon, the acting director of that agency, there is recognition at the state level that they need to do more to make these programs more effective in rural parts of the state and small towns and northern Michigan. So I can't say that we've moved the needle there yet, but there is, I think, more recognition. And so your voices and our voices are being heard on that. And I do hope to be able to report more success on that in the future. In the reporting section, I would highlight the 5 metrics that are part of our economic development dashboard. These were developed with city commissioners and others in our strategic planning of 2019. And the reason that I would point to that is that all 5 of those metrics have trended positive. Again, we're not out of the woods. There's a lot that still needs to be done. There's a lot of work there's a lot of places that, there's a lot of things that aren't perfect yet, but we've seen bachelor's degree and post-secondary certificates, the prime age working population, the number of technical jobs, the annual GDP per employee, and the local wage compared to the state average all trend positive in those dashboard metrics. So that's a good thing, and again, that was a community-wide effort to set those benchmarks, so it's good to see that they're improving. The final thing I would highlight is some of the things that we have planned for this coming year as we move into 2023. Kind of to the point about housing, I think there's more that can be done with our local tools, our local development tools. We hope to get more support from the state, but until that time, we do think that there's more that can be done with local tools, especially in housing. We're going to continue to build out the industry-specific and cluster development of several areas of promise, many of which are you know, a combination of what our local education community is good at and what, you know, what our area is becoming known for, especially with marine technology, drone technology with the college's expertise there. So we're really excited about that. And the Metropolitan Planning Organization step, as we hopefully, it's been a long time in coming, and we're still waiting, but as we get confirmation on the census numbers, there's a lot that can be done there to make sure that we utilize that designation to its fullest effect for the betterment of a whole host of things in the community. So that's a very quick rundown of the report. I'm happy to take any questions specific to the report or other items that we're working on.
Yes, go ahead.
I've got a few, thank you. You mentioned the Office of Rural Development, really happy that that's finally coming around. You also mentioned, you know, issues with MSHDA, red tape and, you know, just how slow everything is and how much competition there is for that funding. And we're oftentimes in competition with each other in this region. Do you know if the Office of Rural Development is working on that particular issue? Is that under their scope?
The good thing about the Office of Rural Development is that it is broad in scope and can get involved in any issue that is impactful for rural areas of Michigan. So that could be broadband, it could be housing, it could be childcare, it could be transportation. There's a broad spectrum there that Sarah Lucas and her team can work on. And in fact, we actually have a housing-related project that's being formulated right now. It's not ready for, you know, public, but it will be soon. And we've engaged Sarah Lucas to help us bridge that gap with existing MEDC and MSHDA programs. So that is absolutely, you know, part of their bailiwick. I'd also mention that some of the funding that was approved for that office is specifically grant funding that can fill the gap with some of these other programs. So a community may not have the matching funds that would qualify. The Office of Rural Development's grant program could provide that matching fund to gap fill with other state and federal programs.
State and federal?
Correct.
I have a couple other questions.
Please,
unless there's
go ahead.
other- Okay. You mentioned these Google Pilot ads.
Mhm.
I missed what those ads were for. Was it attracting business to the Traverse City region, or what were those?
Yes, it's specifically, it is a business attraction marketing. It was social media ads, some of which are in the Appendix 3, are some
Okay.
examples there. And you see there that the
Yeah,
top
I've
metro regions for the ad campaign were Lansing, Saginaw, and Kalamazoo. And the key thing, you see some number of impressions, number of clicks, but the biggest thing in social media marketing, as many of you know, is you can put it out there, but is anyone clicking on it and going to the resource? And that's where I highlighted the Google conversion rate.
And then you mentioned that you all are working on some other local tools related to housing.
Not all of them are related directly to housing, but some of them can be used for housing. So for example, met with the County Economic Development Corporation recently. They're the only entity that has the capability of doing revenue bonds, tax-exempt revenue bonds. Tax-exempt revenue bonds have a whole host of uses. They can be used for private company expansion, but they can also be used for nonprofit housing development. And so marketing those as a tool and getting more utilization of that tool is one way that we hope to address not just housing, but a whole host of other things.
I'm sure Sarn already knows about that, but, yeah. And then when are we getting those final census numbers? We keep, our meetings keep getting canceled.
November,
related-
December.
Well, yeah, sure.
Yeah,
November, December.
Is it now November?
November, December.
my most recent conversation with Terry Vandercook at Networks Northwest was likely December,
For now.
for now.
So what's on the horizon for next year?
Well, in addition to that census issue, we're, like I said, very excited about some of the industry cluster development things that are starting to gain steam. Last week, we welcomed a electric boat manufacturer based in Sweden here for an event last Tuesday. The development of the electric charging corridor, which is something we're working on with a couple of different communities, including the city of Traverse City, could really put us on the map as a place, not just the environmental benefits of marine electrification, but to our big push, if we're a place that is great to boat, if we're a place that has the infrastructure for electric marine usage, perhaps we can be a place for the research, development, and production of that technology as well. So it's advanced manufacturing jobs and other engineering, technical jobs that are high paying, and if those companies are going to move from Europe and set up North American operations, we want them to be here. So that's just one example of some of the things that we're really we're hoping to push further. We also have another electric boat manufacturer that's based in England that is going to visit next month.
Thank you.
Thank you for your questions.
Tim.
Timothy.
Yeah, whenever opportunity arises, I like to mention Senate Bill 432, so I'm going to mention Senate Bill 432 and the number 432 a few times for people. But just to be clear, my understanding from what you said is that's part of that housing package of bills that will hopefully be addressed in the lame duck session, and both sides are interested. They just don't want to give a win to the other side.
That's my understanding, yes.
Okay, and I'm on an email list for it. I've sent things to the city clerk about it as far as distributing it amongst ourselves, but to me, that Senate Bill 432, if it can get legs and become law, there's so many creative ways on how it could be used by this community. And so I know you have plenty going on, but if you think there's a good chance it will pass, and I hope you keep advocating for it, talk to people and get them to start brainstorming about some of the creative ways, kind of what should we be offering, or could we be offering pilots for? Sorry, that's the bill for payment in lieu of taxes that would be up to us to decide what qualifies. So not just to give away everything, but what is it we're trying to accomplish? What are different very creative ways? I've heard people talk about, how could it be used to enable people to downsize later in life should they choose to, because right now they tend to be locked into their homes. They can quadruple their taxes to buy a condo that probably costs more than they can sell their house for, so there's no incentive to do it. But if somehow we could create a structure that allows them to essentially take their taxes, they're not taking their taxes, but create a pilot that matches their taxes or something like that. But that's just, off the cuff sort of thinking, maybe it's illegal, et cetera. But I'm sure there's 100 other very creative ideas out there. And I'm hoping that should it get approved, it doesn't take us years to come up with possible ways to move it forward. Let's be maybe not ready, but at least almost ready to start having serious discussions about where to go.
Yeah, I absolutely think that's an excellent point, and we are hoping that is passed. Obviously, we'll continue to work with Housing North, Housing Next, and the entire Housing Michigan Coalition. I was part of a panel discussion with the Michigan Association of Chamber Professionals in Grand Rapids Thursday last week with the executive director of Housing Next, and talking specifically about some of the creative uses that could be used if this comes to pass.
Thank you.
Good. Thank you. Any other questions? keep us informed about the housing stuff, and if we need to pass some resolutions or whatever that could help, we may want to do it sooner rather than later, because you may want to do that, maybe put that out there, so.
I would actually say that there's already been an advocacy call to action issued by Housing North that we could share with you.
Okay.
That is specific to that package of bills.
All right, get that to us, and maybe between Marty and I, we can write a letter of support from the city saying this is what we want to do. Put our initials on there, maybe all 7 of us somehow or another.
Well, I was going to say, if it's not going to hit till the lame duck, then we probably would even have time to vote on a resolution.
Well, it depends on when the lame duck, because we won't meet again
Oh, yeah, we've got the election.
until after the election, and it'd be November the 17th or somewhere.
Yeah.
like that.
Yeah, never mind, I forgot about the election day
But
off.
we will get it
Fine, we'll be
taken
nice
care
to
of
the
one
clerk's
way or the
office and give them a day off.
Just get it, if you would pass that along again.
I'll find that, yeah.
We'll see what we can do so we can put our support behind that.
And I know that you know where we stand on the short-term rental bill, but also keep pushing against that. I know you are, but that is also in that group of lame
That
duck.
one bothers me more than others.
I
Yes.
would, with your permission, I would ask that the city commission keep an eye on that, because that is another thing that could potentially come to fruition in lame duck. And so to put my professional opinion on it, it's very possible that 4722, HB 4722, is pushed forward for approval in lame duck, and that is the ban legislation. So we've been very active in voicing our opposition and concern, both as Traverse Connect and as the entire Northern Michigan Chamber Alliance. But there are organizations out there that are pushing very hard in the other direction. So if, make your voice heard as well as ours.
Just a question, so we know how the range to make our voice heard is, I know the House and Senate, especially during lame duck, can get very active. Is that something that is sounding like it might get some support from the governor too? Should we be doing House Rep, Senator, and
I
the
would make
governor?
sure that everyone knows.
Okay, thank you.
The indications are that probably wouldn't pass by itself, but if it was combined with
some pork.
Something else at 3 o'clock in the morning. Okay, I got it.
Okay, got it.
Gotta love it.
We did submit a letter about that, but it may be helpful
I
to
think wouldn't hurt to have another.
to have a
update.
refreshed,
Yeah.
stronger
Yeah.
feeling
Yeah.
about that.
Okay. Okay.
Thank you, appreciate the opportunity.
Thanks, Warren. Thanks.
Okay, thank you very much. Okay. Next, we have a consideration request from Commissioner Warner for the commission to adopt a building electrification policy. And Tim, do you want to kind of give a high overview and then
Sure,
take
happy
the
to.
discussion? Thank you.
Yeah, and I'll start, because I've been trying to say it every week, that we have a strategic priority to view all of our goals and actions through the lens of climate impacts. And I tried to capture it here, and it is a very brief policy and a brief introduction to it. But it's moving things forward, because in the 2016 resolution, and the 100% renewable electricity got most of the attention as part of that resolution, but in there was moving ourselves toward carbon neutrality by mid-century. And mid-century is still a long way off. It was an even longer way off 6 years ago, but 6 years have passed. And yes, the Green Team has done some very good things, but to me, this would be an excellent step, especially given the recent Inflation Reduction Act, which really is largely about climate change. And then likewise, in tying it back to the 2016 timeframe, at that time, getting to 100% renewable for the city, we didn't know how we would do it. But that wasn't up to us. Like I've said to a lot of people that have approached me about this, yes, I'm an engineer, and typically I do like to figure things out. But for things like this that are somewhat aspirational, I'm happy to put on the dumb politician hat. And there's plenty of those out there to share. So we can put on
Well,
dumb
I can
politicians
guarantee
hat.
you I had that on.
We
this
don't
meeting.
have to know how it happens, and just like the 100%, we didn't know how it would happen. That burden gets put on the city manager. That's why he's here. And likewise, for this building electrification, do we know exactly how it'll happen and what roadblocks and hiccups and whatnot? No, but we don't have to. We can say, this is what we want. Please go work with the experts, identify the experts, ones out there in the audience tonight, and help figure it out. And it's not to be, this was another discussion I had, our policies, we think, oh, it's our policy, we have to follow it. Well, we deviate from our policies not infrequently. And sometimes that's just what needs to be done. And so this will, should this move forward, it's not cast in stone. I like to say it's cast in soft mud. We can always tweak the policy, we could completely rewrite the policy, because it is kind of a, okay, what could it be type of thing. 6 months from now, it could be superseded by something more complete. Anyhow, think of it as written in firm mud. Thank you.
In what?
Firm mud, he said.
Firm mud. It's not written in stone if we pass
Oh.
something. It's written in firm mud.
Well, I know that for you folks, I hope you got it, when this came up, I mean, I thought I knew what electrification meant. I had this broad view, but I had to go get my electrification 101. And the group that I got, and I hope you got to see that, gave me a nice overview of what that meant. And what you're talking about is about 13% of the, or at least that, by this group in their measurement, 13% of the total stuff that's after we got to work on. Fortunately, we're already also working on the transportation by buying, whenever possible, vehicles that are electric, and we can do that. So I did that. The question I have, Tim, is that just as I saw this during our agenda review, and then on Thursday, I see Light and Power has shared with you about where they're going through their revision of the climate action plan and what they're doing. Are we jumping the gun, or should we wait for them to get through with that? And then Sarna gives me a call and says, well, we did talk about this back in September, and here was our recommendation. So I'm trying to wrestle all that together into here, because like you just said, some of these policies that you wrote here are pretty, well, I read them as very absolute. They're shall. They're almost like shalls. And I don't operate in shalls very well, because then you're stuck.
So two
And
things.
it's more than permanent mud. It's clay.
Okay. But two things I heard. One was about Light and Power, and yes, Light and Power.
And I'm tickled with that idea. I
Yes,
really
Mayor
am.
Pro Tem Shamro and I sit on the Light and Power Board as well. And I'm very excited that Light and Power as an entity is moving forward with the climate action plan. And I had a good conversation end of last week with Brandy Eckren, the executive director, about this building electrification policy draft and the climate action plan, and how any of this to move forward will need the cooperation and collaboration of TC Light and Power, which was the same case with 100%
Oh, yeah.
renewable as well. And we had those same discussions. Like,
Uh-huh.
none of this happens without cooperation and collaboration. And the same applies here. We did agree, I believe, myself and Brandy Eckren, that this doesn't need to wait for the climate action plan. In fact, Light and Power is moving forward with many initiatives in parallel to the climate action plan, in anticipation of where things might end up, and knowing that this, not this specifically, but building electrification and many pilot projects will be part of the outcome, or anticipated to be part of that outcome. And then the other item that you brought up was the Green Team meeting. And unfortunately, at that meeting, this draft was toward the tail end of the agenda, and everybody had seen a draft prior to the meeting, but the actual discussion, I was able to give, 30 to 60 seconds of input and had to be walking out the door because the meeting was running long. And so I was not there for the discussion, which is then captured in the minutes. But I have had the opportunity to speak with Sarna Salzman, who chairs those meetings. Again, Brandy Ekren, who was there at the meetings. And I've been in communication with Tim Pulliam, who was also at the meeting. And others were Jake Hardy at the meeting and Frank Duturi. And so I would call it staff heavy, which is fine. I've already reported that that particular meeting was the best green team meeting I've been at in many, many years. Very exciting. And I stick with that. I'm not retracting that in any way. But by referring to staff heavy, it is, I was pointing to Marty as far as the person that is burdened with this should it move forward. But Marty shares his burdens with staff. And hopefully this ends up being an acceptable burden in some form. But so I get it, that staff can be more cautious. And that's the tension that Marty gets caught between, us being aspirational potentially and staff being more cautious on the other side. And again, that's his role, is to be in that middle, caught in that tension. So that's the best I can address the input from the green team.
Do you object if we allow staff to take, or at least like on the green team, to look through this with their thoughts, to go through this and give us their final input, and there may be a couple reversions, we have this back in a month? Or do you want this voted on tonight?
No, we can. I mean, it can be a month. I'd love to hear from others and.
Yes. And I'm just going to give a couple areas that I'm having one that I'm struggling with, where it says all new buildings that qualify for payment in lieu of taxes, which are pilots, to be fully electrified. Well, again, are we hurting ourselves? Because we know up here that, but it's mainly in the heating area, that it's the struggle, and it's a pretty heavy expense. Are we hurting ourselves with saying, well, if you want a pilot, you got to do this? Are we hurting ourselves because they may say, well, we can't do it, and we can't afford it, and we can't make it happen?
It's an excellent question. And that's where I believe the cooperation and collaboration with Light and Power comes into play. And also in addressing versions of that question over the past week. We can't expect, should we move this forward tonight, in a month, in 6 months, whenever we as a community decide, okay, it's time to start down this path, which it will happen, it's just a matter of when. We can't continue to build buildings status quo, because if we have a building, a set of drawings before us for a building, or anybody does, and it's going to be heated status quo, kind of typical build, typical heating approach, and now we say, okay, but let's heat it through electrification instead, which generally would be a ground source heat pump. Yeah, that'll be a much higher upfront cost, which could blow something out of the water. And if it's not well insulated and well built, the annual costs are likely higher as well. So where I'm going with that is, whenever it is we move forward with building electrification, that forces us as a community to reconsider how we build buildings. We can't just stick with the status quo, which is part of the climate crisis. We can't just stick with the status quo. We have to re-examine, again, not us, but as a community, we have to re-examine how we build buildings. There's things called like passive requirements, where they're so well insulated, thought through architecturally, et cetera, that they don't require that much energy. And so the upfront cost is lower, and then the annual costs are lower. Because what should be able to happen with this is that over the lifetime, you actually save a considerable amount of money. So if we stick with status quo buildings, yeah, it's a big loser. So it, in effect, forces a change in how we do things.
And then there's the other one, that all city property sold or leased be deed restricted. Now, the lease, if it's leased, we still own it. But if we sell it, how can we force on a private person? You're owning it, you own it, it's your property. We're going to dictate what they do with their property afterwards?
We do it
Maybe,
with rent.
I mean, yeah, we can ask the city attorney, and again, I guess,
Well,
city manager can share the burden with the city attorney of how do we make some of these crazy things potentially work?
I'm struggling with those two instead of just saying, see, to me, they're almost absolute statements. And I'm not as in favor of absolute, but I'm in favor of encouraging, trying to needle them.
Yeah, but encouraging, again, we think of mid-century, but that's not that far off. And when we build a building,
I'm
even
not worried about what
TCAPs
we do. What we
Right,
do.
but if we are part of helping a property be developed, say the Beitner property, we have the potential to influence the outcome, because as far as buildings, like even TCAPS builds elementary schools for at least 50 years, like, 50-year lifespan, and typically longer. So any buildings that are currently in the works or to be built, they're going to be there well past mid-century, probably till the end of the century. And so now is the opportunity to be thinking about how to design them, engineer them for that mid-century, because retrofitting is so much more expensive.
Yes.
So, it sounds like we're not gonna probably vote on this and kick it for a little bit, which is good, because I was out of town in the UP until yesterday, and I did have 2 Light and Power board members and someone involved in our housing in the community reach out to me, and they definitely did not take this as firm mud. They took this as, we cannot apply for pilots now because of the cost to electrify through heat for a large building right now. Just the technology isn't in town here, literally, for most people, and the cost is very high. So I'd love to hear that, I'd love for the green team to examine this and create, and I agree with Tim, we did the 100% without having every piece in place, but we also didn't say we're gonna make 100% and not have some solar projects online that we were looking at and some other things. So I don't think it has to be, whatever comes back has to be prescribed. I think it just has to maybe have some edited language. The other thing that I would say is this is now the 3rd time I think we've had discussions in the last 6 weeks or 8 weeks of a policy, buying cars, this. There was another one, and I can't think of it right now, maybe it was our I&I, of we aren't looking at this through a green enough lens. And so we've said repeatedly, and I know I've mentioned it a couple times, we need to have the green team examine more of our policies. So while I agree that this should be sent back, and I'm not saying I wouldn't like to see it come back sooner than, a month from now or whatever, I also would almost say, could we get the green team to maybe have a policy summit? We have snow summits, we have all these other things, because it just kind of keeps coming up here and there. Then we're kind of in the middle of things, or we're in the middle of a project, and can't totally be brought to a halt to re-examine that, but it just keeps becoming a problem. We're trying to buy cars like we did 3 years ago, and everything's out a year or 2 years, and so we're taking what's available. Like, there's all these little pieces that we keep having these conversations about, and then we say, well, we've got the green team, but we're not giving them time to really weigh in on policy. So in conjunction with this conversation, I'm going to say I request that we have the green team have a policy summit and look where they might be able to help us with some policies that'll keep us green.
And I have no issue with getting that. I just think it needs a little bit more work, because
Well,
I like to see it move. But like, we know we got a senior center. We know that it's been thought about electrifying it. We already heard that it's going to add some money to it. That's a self-decision we get to make. Now, whether we want to make it now or we wait to renovate later on, which I agree. Even the 101 course I just took says renovating is tough. It is tough. So, I mean, if we're going to do it, you should do it now. And that may be a decision we want to make. At least the one project we know that could be in front of us in the next 6 months is the senior center. That's a new building. And yes, you've heard me say before, if we're going to do it right, let's do it right, whatever, quote, right is. I have no problem with the electrification and everything we're trying to do, the green roofs, if we can get it, the environmental issues. But right now, the way I read it, it's a little stark. I need a little wiggle room to say, okay, let's push, but without beating ourselves up or beating up everybody else. That's all I'm looking at, so. Because you're right, 30 years will pass. I know I won't be around to enjoy it. And like you gave me an article today of planting little acorns for oaks. I won't be around to see them, but I'll plant them. But I won't see them grown, that's for sure. So. Yes.
Yes, similarly, I like the idea about this in that it's setting a standard that we should be advancing towards, but I do have concerns that particularly for things like pilots, the infrastructure and technology is not fully to a state that it is the most cost competitive, and as absolute standards of 100% of all projects, it doesn't allow much flexibility. And yes, you can say that this is more guidelines than set in stone. You can say that this is mud and that we don't always follow our policies, which is true. But if this is intended to be a guiding document, the current language seems a little restrictive in that regard. Right. And I wouldn't want, if there to be a project that comes through, that it can't be built just because of this policy in place, or that this policy unduly adds cost for something that, yes, electricity might be a more fuel efficient or greenhouse gas efficient tool to provide whatever heat or heat or function that a fossil fuel burning or otherwise non-electric appliance could do, but the gains from that are inconsequential compared to, say, the percentage of concrete versus wood in the overall construction of the building.
You just went way past me, but that's okay. But I understand where you're going with it, in principle. Yes, ma'am.
A few things. Thank you for bringing this, and I appreciate the
No, I
discussion
do.
we're having.
I
This is really good. One, I actually want to add something to it because I'm thinking about we're sitting in this facility, and many of our facilities are jointly owned with the county. And we are, I know at least here, we're in the minority share of the building. I'm not sure about some of the other ones. So I would like to add something to the policy that, we don't have necessarily control over that, but built into the policy that the city will work with the county on any renovation projects to that end, something to that effect, so that it's not off the table that we would push for it. That the policy also states that we push for this even in times when we're in the minority ownership of the building project as part of the discussion. So that's one thing. The other thing, if we make all decisions related to how much money we're going to spend, we're not going to make much progress on our climate goals immediately, but we know long-term we will. Yeah. This pilot issue related to new buildings, my understanding is with the new, I'm not going to get the letters right, but with the
IRA.
Thank you. Which I don't know why they use that, because we also have another IRA, but for whatever reason.
Mine's gone to heck in the market.
Yeah, well, let's not go there, but but we just agreed to work at hiring a grant writer to access these funds for the city. And, offsetting some of these costs for buildings related to pilot could be included in that, right? So we can't, our imaginations will be the death of us if we can't think broadly about the possibilities and our goals and how to get to the yes related to our climate goals. So I want to think about that because we have big opportunity. There's a lot of money out there going for exactly this reason, right? The other thing is, my only kind of issue with this is the major renovations piece seems kind of loose, like that feels a little too subjective. And I feel like people could say, well, it's not a major renovation. You know, we're only spending $1 million on it, or it's not a major renovation. We're only doing this, or we're only. So
Everything just became minor.
Right, because of that. You know, it may not be this body, it may be another body, you know, we have to think long-term here. So that would be my only concern about that one, is to be a little bit more specific related to the metrics, related to what major renovation means.
So, again, you know, when you get down like to no new this or no new, as much as we like to have, you know, but if we needed all of a sudden a new boiler and the technology wasn't there to switch it, well, we got to change the boiler. But right, that reads, we're not giving ourselves.
Yeah, right, if an emergency situation like a
Well, I
new
mean,
place.
so
yeah.
we want to make sure that how we read this, and you hit 5 years from now, whoever's not, this was our policy because we're trying to get to this by 2050. And so we want to move that. So I guess that's where I want to leave it to the green team. I know Sarna had some, Sarna has forgotten more about this stuff than I ever hoped to know. So I trust her that she can work that through with the rest of the members of the team and bring us back something that we can sit here and say, we feel, yeah, we're going to move it, and how it happens. You know, and we will pay more. And I've had an individual that on numerous occasions when we get to see each other, you know how you bought all that solar power and you're paying more for electricity. Yeah, we know it. We made that conscious decision at that time because this is what we wanted to do. We made it. That's fine. And I know that's what we'll do now as we look at each case on its merits and say, yes, we ought to do it now. We don't want to wait. So.
Just, I appreciate the conversation, excellent. But one comment that I kind of left out earlier, not intentionally, but it's referred to by different words, but whether it's, you know, triple bottom line, things like that. So it's not just looking at the easy kind of status quo, oh, it costs this much to build and this much to operate, but what are the other things as far as like health and the environment, et cetera. Part of my concern, though, is if a draft becomes more, well, let's look at the costs. We could spend years looking at costs. You know, you can hire graduate students and have them go study and model the costs depending on how deep you want to go into it. And so it's where to kind of set a fence around that analysis and modeling, and just to be cognizant of it, I guess.
I understand that, and that's why I don't want it to just be that. It's got to be, what's the end goal by 2050?
Thank you.
Yeah. All right. Sarna, do you want to speak to this, or you just want to sit back and wait, and you'll just do your thing when you do your thing?
Somebody wants to talk.
I would like to speak to
Okay. I'll let you. Well, you know the rules.
You all set your priority. Janine Easterday, Lake Ridge Drive, Traverse City resident. You all set your priorities, and it sounds really wonderful, and then you never see any action. I mean, I know there is action, but I sound like a broken record. Climate change is not a crisis, it's an emergency. There are so many other ways to look at how we work as a city, as a community. I love the green team idea, but I would hope that the summit idea, but to nail it down to some smart goals, measurable goals, realistic and timely, and put some time frames on them so that you can know where you are instead of going in this circle about what needs to happen and, okay, we'll talk about it in December and then we'll talk about it in February, and I'm not going to waste my 3 minutes. But there are other things to do. We buy a lot of concrete. There are ways to buy concrete that does not put additional carbon into the atmosphere. I think I spoke to this group last year about the methane that continues to be burned off at the wastewater treatment plant. When I made the tour in the spring, Jacobs talked about, and I know they've presented to to the commission that when you're renegotiating that contract, move that contract forward, because what they say they can do is take that methane and convert it into heat energy for this very building. So I'm asking you to research some of those kinds of things and not just limit yourself to electrification and how you're going to, what TC Light and Power does, but look at everything you do. Look at how you landscape. Look at how you buy concrete. Look at how you do all of those kinds of things really, truly, truly with an eye towards how can we make this the most green. And if you do that Green Team Summit, they can help. I'm sure that they will be able to identify different kinds of building materials, different kinds of options that we have, incentives that we can put in place with permitting and zoning and all those kinds of things. So I'll stop now because you'll see me again, I'm sure. Thanks.
Thank you.
And thank you for the opportunity to speak.
You're welcome.
Outside of public comment.
Sarna Salzman, 535 Woodland Drive. Well, again, thank you for this conversation. I think having this conversation at the city commission level is really important because of that really important dynamic push-pull between the aspirational elected officials and the pragmatic staff that have to implement these aspirational goals. I think this is a great time to set another aspirational goal in front of, set a resolution of some kind that says, okay, 2050 is over here, and we met our 2020 goal. We had a pandemic in the middle, but now let's set something right here that is tangible and seemingly impossible right now. Meanwhile, Light and Power is working on some real pragmatic planning. Let's let them stay 2 steps ahead on some things and adopt all the stuff that we can steal from them. We should really be focusing on making that happen. And master planning is happening, and that's supposed to fill out a 5-year actionable set of plans, and that's really where the Green Team has been mobilized around, is how can we make that next version of the master plan full of actionable, pragmatic items that help guide the city towards that kind of holistic, climate-informed decision-making on multiple levels. It's no easy task. I'm not going to lie, and I'm not the expert on these things. Maybe I've read a couple more articles than you.
You took course 301.
And I talked to a lot of really smart people, some of whom are on the Green Team, and the conversation that happened after, unfortunately, Commissioner Werner left the room was on what would be an actionable policy that would be easier to stay true to over time and also cover a little more ground than just the electrification of everything, which might be a great aspirational future target to hit. That's something that's commonly coming down that we hear, but also there are technology issues that don't, it's not a proven, there's a lot of evolution happening in the technology right now, and it's not a great solution in every case at this moment in time, but it might be, hopefully it will be. So anyway, the Green Team's kind of conclusion for that session was that it would be great if the City Commission stepped in and said, hey, let's set a policy where all vendors have to provide multiple different modeled analyses as part of their bid package. They know it up front. This was kind of Tim Pulliam of Keen Technology Solutions' point. If a vendor knows that they have to model an all-electric version of a new facility or a renovation on the front end of a project, it's not that expensive or time-consuming. It's when it happens at the 11th hour and you already have the envelope and the building put together, that's when it becomes, time-consuming and you get a lot of pushback and expensive, frankly. But on the front end, if the vendors know that, well, then they're going to deliver that to you. And it will have this great effect of encouraging that analytic behavior from your vendors who really, we need a lot of vendor professional development education, not just in our community, but across the country. There's a lot of, it's hard to keep up with all the technology right now for even the best in class. So encouraging that analytic behavior of the vendors, also encouraging the analytic behavior from you and your staff so that you can really make hard decisions between X priority and Y priority is, it's not, you guys have difficult spending decisions in front of you every day. So having better information in front of you would be helpful. Now, I will personally advocate there's some metrics that we need to be monitoring that we haven't figured out how to actionably do. This has been an ongoing issue, and it would be really great to resolve that as part of the master planning process. And that in itself will take some money, probably not that much money, but some money, and to dedicate energy, resources towards that monitoring solution, I think would be a really wise move to make all these other aspirational goals more actionable.
Okay.
So thank you for letting me add to that conversation.
Are you still willing to take this on?
Yeah, absolutely. I think if the city commission is directing the city manager to work with his green team to put together some kind of policy response about facilities in particular, or even a policy summit, Commissioner Shamrock, I think that's a really interesting, fun-sounding idea, as long as it's not in this room with this light. I think the green team is more ready to lean in harder than they really have been in years past. And so I think that they would appreciate having a directive from you to respond to, as opposed to just kind of like, what should we focus on today? Let's talk more about master planning or.
I would like to get your response to this, because I think it's something that this body, well, this city, because this body won't be around forever, but it's a guidepost that here's where we need to be moving toward, so that by 2050 we may not hit it, but we're far ahead of where we were.
I would like to see that brought to us in some kind of a presentation.
Yeah.
It doesn't have to be hammered out and separate of
Yeah.
the discussion about the electric policy that can still continue. I was going to say Earth Day, but that still seems too far. So let's say by the symbol of spring in northern Michigan, spring break, the study session like March 20th. And we can be a little, if that's a difficulty, come back to me and let me know. But I also want to respect that our green team is a volunteer group that does not work for the city. They are not our employees, and they typically meet quarterly. So I would like them to give them some fair time to get together and talk, knowing that being respectful of times coming up here with holidays, but also not be kicking it down the line too far. But I appreciate some of the ideas that you've already shared. And almost like and so you don't have to do it here in this lighting. Also make it more, maybe the presentation more like our goals and studies session, where you are bringing us some ideas. We can kick them around a little, we can revisit them, but it's the intro from the great minds that we've brought together to advise us that are going to advise us, and we can kind of play with it from there. So that's not inherently separate of the electrification discussion and policy that we're talking about, but is that larger policy as we're talking about some of these other ideas and implementations and materials we can study and things like that. So I'll be the one this time to put the date on it and put that out there for everyone then.
Okay.
Love it.
All right. Are we okay with that, sir?
Yeah,
Yes,
just
Tim.
a comment in disagreement with Ms. Salzman is, back in 2016, the city commission was way out in front of Light and Power. And it was a little awkward, to say the least, at times, but I'd like to think it became more of a friendly competition. And then in 2018, Light and Power came up with their 100% by 2040 for all of Light and Power electricity, and an interim goal of 40% by 2025. But then we took the spotlight back here because we achieved the goal by 2020 of the 100%. So the spotlight was on us again. And now the spotlight's just kind of, I'm not sure where to go. But I think it's fine. This is the contradiction. I think it's fine for this body to get out in front of Light and Power again. We don't have to wait and follow their lead. Those weren't the words, but we don't have to see where they're going. Again, we can put on those hats and be like, this is what we want. Sounds good. Go figure it out, please. And take that spotlight, and that's not all bad.
Okay.
I would agree with that. I think you should just steal everything that Brandy's figuring out.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Warner, for bringing it forward. And I've learned more about it than I thought I was going to, but thank you. All right, we got some appointments. We have I'm going to start with the Brown Bridge. We need to create an ad hoc interview committee. There are 4 seats that are expiring. We only have 3 applicants at this point.
I'll read the motion.
Anyway, on this one, by the luck of the draw, Commissioner Walter, Treadwell, and Wilson are to serve on that committee, with Commissioner Walter serving as chair. And you got a deadline to get this done in.
We got it.
January 1.
I'll go ahead and make the recommendation then, that an ad hoc interview committee be established to make recommendations regarding 4 appointments to the Brown Bridge Advisory Committee, 4 seats expiring October 3rd, 2025, held by Nelson Asper, Michael Vickery, Kathleen Kasdorf, and Jamie Kidwell Bricks, and that Commissioner Walter, Commissioner Treadwell, and Commissioner Wilson be appointed to such committee, with Commissioner Walter serving as chair.
Second.
We got a motion and a second. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
All-
I was just going to mention something for discussion.
Oh.
I'm not trying to hold it up, but just put it out there with the deadline in mind to, for those in charge of the calendar and scheduling, that I'll be gone for a month, starting November 20th, so probably be ideal to get it done before then.
Good idea.
Okay.
I think one of our members has the deadline a little sooner than that, but.
Okay.
No.
Okay.
No.
Okay, all those
January
opposed to the
1st.
motion say nay.
Good to know.
Okay, motion carried. Next one is appointments to the Downtown Development Authority Board. There are, let's see here, we have 3 seats that are open. We have 5 applicants. The 3 current individuals holding these seats are seeking reappointment. In this case, the mayor is supposed to serve on this, but because one of the individuals is a son-in-law, I'm recusing myself from that, and I've asked Mayor Pro Tem Shamrow to take my place in there, so that you can serve. When it does come back, I will also recuse myself from any votes on this. I just want to make you aware up front. But by the luck of the draw, Commissioner Warner and Commissioner Wilson are also appointed to this committee. Well, you're going to be, don't worry, you get to be gone for a month later on, so you'll be fine. So with Mayor Pro Tem Shamrow to serve as chair. Need a motion?
I can go ahead and make the motion, then I have a comment. I'll make the motion that an ad hoc interview committee be established to make recommendations regarding 3 appointments to the Downtown Development Authority, terms expiring September 15th, 2026, for seats previously held by Katie Berdato, Gabe Schneider, and Jeffrey Gibran, and that Mayor Pro Tem Shamrow, Commissioner Werner, Commissioner Wilson be appointed to such committee, with Mayor Pro Tem Shamrow as chair.
Okay, we got support?
Support.
Okay, we have support, yes.
Just a question for staff, like when it's coming to the ad hoc, since I have the privilege of being on the ad hoc, is in looking through it earlier this evening, and now I'm not finding it exactly, but the whole property interest, oh, there it is down below the current members. Just if could have some double checking or clarification about the whole, at least a majority of the members, 7 shall be persons having an interest in property, or be officers, members, blah, 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 or own taxable property within the city. I thought there had been previously like property interest was a certain number, and then living in the city was like.
Yeah, there was like a
Somehow
matrix.
that's squished together now. Can somebody just double check all that, please?
Yeah.
And will the matrix be included
Yeah.
when we do the ad hoc? I know we've done that
No,
in the past.
I think we had asked that the matrix at that time be brought up to you. The only other requirement is, of course, the 7 people have to have interest in the downtown property or something like that. But there
Placement
has
of
to
that
be,
or in there is just.
yeah, but there has to be one individual that has to be a resident of that. We have that, so, at this point, so.
Thank you.
Okay, everybody else could be just residents of the city, so, okay. Okay, okay, we have a motion and a second. All those in favor of the motion say aye.
Aye.
Okay, all those opposed say nay. Okay. Then last one, we have an ad hoc committee as it relates to the planning commission. We have 2 expiring seats on the commission. We have 7 applicants. One of the individuals has left us, Janet Fleshman, has, I guess, does not want to be reappointed at this point. I want to say right now, thank you, Janet, for your many years of service, for being on this board. You did help make a difference, so thank you for that. And I know you'll be sending a letter giving that thanks. But I have to be on that commission. I have to be on there. But also, by the luck of the draw, we have Commissioner Treadwell and Commissioner Stanley also to serve with the mayor to serve as chair. So who'd like to make that motion? Somebody better hurry up or we'll point you to it. Go ahead.
You just said, so moved, second.
Yes.
Okay, Mr. Treadwell made the motion.
No, I made
And
the motion. Mr. Treadwell, second.
You got that? Good. She's much quicker on that one. All those in favor of the motion say aye.
Aye.
All those opposed say nay. Motion passes. Okay, we have reports and announcements. You can read those. We have reserved public comment. We asked regarding the Beta millage, and thank you for your patience in enduring with us.
No problem, and I'll keep my marks brief with the hour of time and just highlight just a couple things. Specifically, I came here, Eric Lingar, Director of Communications and Development, Bay Area Transportation Authority. I came here to mention that Beta has a millage renewal on the ballot on November 8th. It is a lower rate than what was approved by voters in 2017 at 0.478 mils. But I also wanted to just highlight real quickly what's happening in the world of public transit in our community, and 2 things in particular apply to the conversations that you guys were having this evening. One is the green aspect. One of the things that Beta has been emphasizing over the last 5 years is the diversification and the right sizing of our fleet to be environmentally stewards of our community. So currently, actually, it's 50% of our fleet is propane powered, which has less greenhouse gas emissions, less wear and tear on the powertrain. It's more cost effective from a fuel perspective from our viewpoint. And by 2025, 2026, barring production of vehicles and delivery of them, 100% of Beta's fleet will be low or no emission with either propane-powered or electric-powered vehicles. We're slated to get our first 3 electric vehicles sometime in the next 12 to 24 months. We don't know when, but Beta is committed to focusing on being a green steward with our vehicle fleet. The other thing, too, that you guys mentioned as well was housing was a very important topic here in this discussion today. And Beta is part of a project with the Traverse City Housing Commission, where we are one of the first projects in our region, at least in the Midwest, to have housing and transit combined together in a partnership. So Beta will be having its new operations center there on part of the 50-acre parcel, but the Traverse City Housing Commission is also building workforce housing. It will have some Habitat for Humanity homes. It also is sectioned out to have a child care center built into it, a transfer area, and a park and ride location, all in kind of one central location on Lafreniere Road and that Lafreniere-Hammond corridor. If you guys have been up that corridor lately, there is a lot of development going on in that area right now. That the funding for this project is coming from state and federal grants. It is not part of our millage request. Beta has received about $17 million in state and federal grants so far for our portion of the project, and the Traverse City Housing Commission actually just got $6 million for the first phase of their project. So it's rolling forward. We had a kind of a mini project kickoff last week to kind of officially unveil the future home sign of that project, but we're really excited about it. And the timeline is to break ground in the spring of 2023 with the full, at least first phase of the project to be move-in ready by end of 2024. So so millage, of course, is on the ballot in November 8th. We continue to move people around the community. This is for the continued operation of Beta. And then there's a lot of other exciting things going on in the public transit world from our community. So I'll leave it brief, but I'll answer any questions. Yeah, Ashley.
Thank you, Eric. I don't know if these come directly from you or not, but I have a neighbor who is interested in a sign. And I heard there are no more, but where might she acquire one if she's interested?
So there's a Friends of Beta group, and
I've got a spare that I'm guessing it's you're moving it to a lower density area, lower sign density.
So Commissioner Treadwell is on the Friends of Beta group, and I'm sure could hook you up with a
You
sign.
gave him a ride home. He probably has one in his yard. He can let you borrow.
Exactly.
No, I have one. I just have a neighbor who would like it.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Any other questions? Sorry we could no longer, but we wish you well.
I just had a quick question.
Oh, I'm sorry.
Question/comment. So, glad to see you guys are up for renewal and going forward, and always support you, and love the new project that we've all been hearing about for years now, and excited to see it moving forward. I guess this is kind of more of a comment than a question, but in the future, I would hope to see with the Headley and things that are involved with Beta deciding to go for a full mill again, because I know there's been driver shortages and other things like that, and operational costs for everything aren't getting cheaper, including you all. So, it's done for this year and support it, but I hope in the future Beta isn't afraid to come and ask for the full mill that's been given by the public in the past, because the services are so important. We'd hate to see you all struggling just to try and, on paper, make it look like it's an increase.
Sure.
So, thank you.
Yes, and again, yes, full disclosure, I am a member of Friends of Beta, but I do have a question for services generally, in that can there be an improved consistency? I get that we've got weather that isn't that great right now, and that can make it a little harder, but right now, like if I check the schedule on Beta's website, it says that the Bay Line stop nearest me is at 3 minutes after the 20-minute interval. If I check Google Maps, it says it's 8 minutes after the 20-minute interval. And I have seen buses anywhere within that time, or 2 minutes either side of that. Like today, I arrived at the bus stop, and I saw the bus going past 2 minutes before the scheduled time, and therefore I had to wait another 20 minutes before the next bus. So I'm not saying that this is a huge problem, but I would like to see a little more consistency.
Sure. So one thing on that point real quick, Beta is in the process of rolling an entire, what's called a computer-aided dispatch and automatic vehicle locator technology suite that we hope to have rolled out in the beginning of 2023, that will have real-time tracking on every single vehicle. So you'll be able to see in real time when you're standing at the test stop where that bus is and how quickly it will be to get to you for all of our fleet.
That would be wonderful.
Yep.
Thank you.
All right.
Okay, any other question? We wish you well.
Thank you.
Thank you. Okay. With that, we're down to regular public comment. Any other member of the audience like to make a comment? Thank you for taking our pictures. I'll take 3 glossies. And last but not least, let's see what's left here at the very last. We're rolling down here. Mayor and city commissioners, yes, ma'am.
It was pointed out to me during our break that it was not part of our announcements, though some other things for next week were that the 25th, so next Tuesday, so people can put on their calendars ahead of time, Light and Power is launching some of our climate action plan initiative publicly, and so that's going to be 4 to 6 at the Tattle Woodmere branch. So again, our friends at Tattle hosting a public event for us that we always appreciate. It's an open house style, so if anybody can come between 4 and 6, they're welcome to come. And then I was just going to add a quick 2 cents. I was up in Marquette for the Fresh Coast Film Festival, and there was a documentary about Negaunee has been building out a rails project, the Iron Heritage Trail that leads to Ishpeming and Marquette, and I had a chance briefly to talk after to Nate Heffron, who's their city manager. He was there for it. And first of all, they gave major kudos to our own Tart Trails for kind of being the leaders on that kind of connectivity, and just wanted to let people know that that's it's inspired and all around now, and so that's something that we can all look forward to in our communities throughout Michigan, that we're all connecting. So who knows, maybe we'll be connected to Marquette and Ishpeming and Negaunee in the future.
Anybody else? Great. Unless you just want to stay longer, you're all more than welcome to stay, but I'm calling this meeting adjourned, and you can stay as long as you like, until they throw you out.
Thanks for the warm welcome. I woke up at 4 and
You're welcome.
Dragon.
I was trying to multitask, you know.
You did great.
See what I can do.